Introduction to the Undercover from the corner. It is necessary to let fragmented clues hijack sufficient evidence in order to jointly restore a complete truth. He adheres to the principle that when unresolved cases are mixed with personal emotions, trouble will come to his door. That's why he decisively chose to keep himself out of the situation, even if occasionally labeled as indifferent. But he will not be discouraged by this, and can even confidently defend the people he has deceived, calmly engraving this line of words on his own epitaph. This used to be a hypocritical bastard. Facts are always filled with helplessness. After all, there are times when one has to immerse oneself deeply in it. The background of this book is fictional, and the characters and plot are completely fictional. However, there are parts of the background, the names of things, and the rules and laws that are consistent with the names and uses of the real environment. Moreover, public order and good customs are in line with common sense, so inference can be made based on normal logic. If everything else is similar, it is purely a coincidence. Preface. Chenbing illness. You are listening at novel full.audio. Hello, Officer Liang. The high-frequency flickering lights were bright, covering the room with scattered decorations. A table, a desk lamp, 2 chairs, 2 people. Paired with the desk gear set to maximum, the somewhat dazzling desk lamp blends the bright and dim in the spacious space. Make do, mix and match to achieve such a balanced brightness. The overhead fan struggled to rotate, emitting a creaking sound of fragmentation and elongation. Like the weak sigh of a dying old man. Whenever Officer Liang comes here, he is a bit worried. Whether this thing will spin around and throw off the nearby wall ash, or even personally set off to go into the sea and die together with the wall ash. That must be a very unattractive scene. It's hard to understand how to turn on a fan in the winter, but surprisingly no one raised an objection. In fact, the people on both sides of the table just don't want to appear cheap and try to avoid speaking up. It's impossible to have no objections. After all, the place where a potential crisis occurs is directly above their heads facing the fan and wall ash. The free advertising paper cups from the mall stood quietly on the table, with a flashy appearance and a deep color of the freshly brewed cheap instant coffee inside. The creative passion of the people who concoct the taste is too full, so that now the whole room is filled with this strong essence fragrance. It is extravagant to ignore it, and can only coexist with it in silence. In this cold winter, neither of the 2 people on either side of the table pays attention to the warm drink that creates a sense of existence based on their abilities, which is really shameful. Above the paper cup, the warm mist visible to the naked eye in winter slowly rises. Perhaps this thing is meant to serve as a reminder that quiet indoor time is still flowing. It's 2 people who are being mysterious, not this normally functioning world. What broke the balance was a sneaky blow from the young man in prison uniform. The originally soothing mist formation suddenly became chaotic and inexplicably harmed, spreading in the air. Do you have anything to do with me? The young man on the side of the table looked innocent and tilted his head. He was dressed in a neat and excessive prison uniform, with every fold revealing his full spirit. Not like a prisoner, but rather like an actor who is not very dedicated. After breaking free from the atmosphere of confrontation, his handcuffed hands began to sway under the table, without any sense of obedience or self-consciousness as a prisoner serving time in prison. The handcuffs clattered, and the sound of metal collisions couldn't stop coming from under the table. But this young man seemed to enjoy it and was very annoying. Perhaps it is because the human neck cannot hold on to his noble brain, nor can it restrain his wandering soul. He is out of place with the 4 words, calm and quiet, that were once neatly pasted on old cardboard on the wall, but now somewhat dilapidated and depressed. Officer Liang, who was sitting opposite him, carefully observed this fresh-looking brain. Perhaps because the hair was too thin, the uniform cut on this person's head after imprisonment seemed to be about to be eradicated, with only a few inches of reflective and frivolous hair visible above his head. His eyesight was poor, and he could even see a bright bald head at a glance. But putting such a uniform and simple hairstyle on this face is not too incompatible. I have to admit, thanks to the gift of heaven, this guy's appearance actually earned a bit of rebelliousness even after stumbling into prison. Although people with such appearances nowadays may not like to make their own named, long-haired light bulbs. There is more than enough stinky beauty, but insufficient consciousness. Officer Liang rummaged through the briefcase next to him for a while, finally taking out a white paper that had been folded several times. He calmly unfolded it and laid it neatly on the table. The person across from him was extremely curious and didn't consider himself an outsider. He just leaned in and wanted to see it. Under constraint, his movements caused the handcuffs to clank and clank, and the parts rubbed against each other, producing a piercing sound that made one's teeth ache. Is it a blank piece of paper? The blatant peek was successful, but the man in prison uniform even lowered his eyebrows and collapsed back into the chair. "You're still showing off, so embarrassing," he said. Officer Liang took out another recording pen and casually threw it onto the table, sliding onto the table in front of the man in prison uniform. The prisoner-dressed man lazily handed over the corner of his eye. "I'm here to tell you a story." Before Officer Liang could finish speaking the first sentence he had finally managed to hold back, the man in prison uniform noticed the elements and made a move first. He took a deep breath of air conditioning, patted the table, and straightened his waist. The pupils have all shrunk. A living person is like a stunned tree with a soul, courage, and independence in a yamen. Officer Liang looked over. "I am sighing, the story is so beautiful." The young man in prison uniform squinted his eyes and suddenly had a mournful look, flashing with tears. Even his tone changed, lengthening the tone at the end of the sentence, and the tone and inflection were extremely greasy. "It's both humorous, sad, heartwarming, and thought-provoking. To be honest, I'm about to hear you cry, sob." The ending of the last word lost some charm, as if the performer couldn't help but become impatient. But the remedy was very timely. After speaking, he made a gesture and twitched his nose, lowered his eyes and frowned, his expression further becoming more brilliant, trying to smooth out the delicate and pitiful sadness in a smooth and continuous manner. However, it made people feel uneasy, as if learning Diyu burial flower was a huge test for their eyes for this indecent male dongsher. Fortunately, he was still handcuffed, otherwise this place wouldn't be able to contain his overflowing desire for performance. "For example, what foolish things have you done before?" Officer Liang remained motionless and hugged his arm. "Do you need my enthusiastic help to review it for you from start to finish?" His tone was plain, but it did reveal a hint of sarcasm about not smiling. The man in prison uniform blinked innocently and said, "From a procedural perspective, exposing such details of the case is not reasonable." Like a law-abiding citizen, he still maintains a resilient and unyielding will under the persecution and intimidation of evil forces. "I'm a bit relieved that you also know the program." Officer Liang didn't take his affectation seriously. "You've been living here for 2 years, why do you think I chose to come to you now?" "Because the prison cell is too old. As an old friend, we need to raise funds through friendship to help us bid farewell to the old and welcome the new in our prison life." The man in prison uniform once again played with his heart, actively making a joyful expression. "Seems to be actively seeking benefits for cohabiting inmates and their own convenient lives." Officer Liang looked at him pretending on the surface, but in reality, he had a strange and sinister attitude. He sighed for himself and said, "It seems that you and your new inmate get along very well. I don't dare to call you your old friend." The prisoner-dressed man began to pretend innocent again and turned his head to whistle. But he also noticed that Officer Liang had other actions. Officer Liang first knocked on the table, gesturing for the person sitting opposite to look over. Then he reached out his hand and quickly drew a few strokes on the table with his fingers. The words are very simple, and the strokes are very clear. The expression of the man in prison uniform suddenly froze at the moment he saw that word. He stared straight at the wooden tabletop without leaving any traces, his gaze fixed on it for a long time. It seems that Officer Liang's hand is still constantly redrawing the bone marrow engraved handwriting on it, repeating it over and over again. And he wants to engrave this scene in his own bone marrow, confirming that the written words are ironclad facts. The man in prison uniform finally sat slowly upright. He seemed to be imagining a scene, and his expression began to constantly change. At one moment, it seemed like a vulture's eyes were devouring the tempting prey exposed in the decaying air, and at another moment, it seemed like an innocent little white rabbit encountering an evil big bad wolf. It seems very strange, but there seems to be nothing wrong with it. The only thing that remained unchanged was his frozen gaze, still straight at the position where the words had been written. Why? He lowered his head, said these words vaguely, then closed his mouth, his white lips trembling slightly. It was only then that he realized that his current appearance was no longer as glamorous as before, and even his face was a bit pale, as if he had been slightly injured. Perhaps his life in prison was not entirely like a fish in water. Just the frequent appearance of funny expressions obscured all the anomalies. Officer Liang knew the reason behind it, so he was not surprised. A few minutes later, the man in prison uniform seemed to have finally recovered, his head pressed against his handcuffed hands, and he began to smile softly. The hoarse laughter was intermittent, but the voice seemed to gradually break out of control, gradually increasing. Until the laughter moved all the muscles in his body, even his shoulders began to shake violently. But at an unknown moment, he once again stopped all his trivial movements, revealing the expression he should have had. All the strange, perfunctory, strange, and circus clown-like emotions were restrained. Where else has a half-smile? In the scene that caught the eyes of Officer Liang, the man seemed to have suddenly turned from a surging ocean into a pool of stagnant water. And the world he gazed upon was an endless white paper. Without waves, stains, let alone grudges, joys, sorrows, and joys. Zhaozuiyuan.com. He has become an outsider in the entire world, and everything has nothing to do with him. But this blank state is also only temporary, and it only lasted for a moment. Then he transformed back into another self. What do you want from giving me such a big benefit? The hands that had been placed under the table began to move to the table at some point. The man in prison uniform tilted his head and imitated Officer Liang's previous action by tapping on the table, as if he had finished with emotion. Then he began to repeat his demeanor of selling tricks. For you, it's very simple. Anyway. Even if I can't do it, you can't come in and hit me, can't I? Listen. The prisoner-dressed man collapsed on the table and moved his shoulder. Officer Liang across from him could only see his lazy half-closed eyes, seemingly devoid of any consciousness as a criminal being interrogated. Like a machine that has resumed operation, although it is receiving instructions one by one. But as everyone knows, this guy is particularly skilled at stealing and playing tricks. However, since there is no concealment of the frivolous face that is about to betray faith, the spirit of honesty is also commendable. But the purpose of honesty is still questionable. This matter probably starts with how we caught you. The prisoner-dressed man once again frolicked his genitals, burying his head and face on the table like an ostrich, and making a crisp sound with his own skull. Howling like when Officer Liang used a lynching that couldn't be captured by surveillance cameras, he then covered his ear with one hand in agony. After a commotion, he quietly raised his head again, and once again, he gave a look of extreme injustice. Refusing to reveal others' dark history in case of trouble is a bit excessive, officer. Don't want to listen. It's not up to you. Chapter 1. Noise. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The solid wood door slowly opened with a long creak. The girl with short hair came in through the edge of the door crack and peeked around, her gaze fixed on the back of the man lying paralyzed on the table. She was carrying a huge fruit basket in her left hand, and a bulging computer bag was slung across her right shoulder, which could be considered a family. Who knows how she dragged so many things and climbed the third floor alone. Seeing the man who noticed someone coming in and stretched lazily, she widened her eyes and wondered, Xiao Gu, why did you arrive so early today? Have you all gone back to bed? Even though Xiao Zi sat up, he still squinted his eyes and said drowsily, speak quietly to me. Xiaolu, this bag of baozi belongs to you, here. Durian baozi. Your taste is really amazing, there is definitely no second person here to compete with you. After speaking, he stood up slightly and picked out one of the plastic bags on the table, which had been sorted out. Then he swayed in mid-air like a cat teasing a dog. Lu Yao's eyes lit up as she casually threw the fruit basket she had just grabbed at the door, making a clanging sound. The voice was uncontrollable, somewhat astonishing. Shoo! Xiao Zi instantly regained his drowsiness and desperately pointed his fingers at the woman sleeping on the opposite table, lowering his voice. Be careful not to be scolded. Lu Yao's spirit shook, and he quickly huddled up as much as possible, carefully passing by the woman who was still lying on the table with her head buried. Unable to resist curiosity, he quietly leaned forward and glanced at her desk. On the randomly torn note paper above, 2 big characters of dragons flying and phoenixes dancing were written with a red oily pen. Don't make noise, why is she here? Lu Yao was really curious, but couldn't speak up. He danced and gestured at Xiao Zi, desperately trying to draw this meaning. Xiao Zi asked herself that she couldn't use the image of Lu Yao for communication. She gestured for her to approach, then leaned in and whispered to her, the case was just closed yesterday. As you know, the one who died was her idol. She stayed with us all night reading the file, and when I woke up this morning, I saw that she was still studying there. I just lay down. So awesome. To show his excitement, Lu Yao danced and gestured while using exaggerated body language. The difficulty of bilingual communication was quite high. Without paying attention, I excitedly waved my arm and touched the office chair across from me. The force was very small, but there were wheels under the chair, and it rolled slightly under a slight thrust. The 2 of them were both startled, their eyes fixed on the woman's ponytail scattered on the table, and only breathed a sigh of relief after realizing that there was no movement in her hair. She really despises integrity in her words. Yesterday, she kept talking about this novelist's bad luck. She can't stand it anymore. She's secretly studying here. Too much. This time the conversation was quite complicated, and Lu Yao's silent expression was not very smooth, so he spoke out due to helplessness. She squatted next to Xiao Zi, puffing her cheeks and eating steamed buns like a hamster, flipping through the case file, taking time to mutter softly. The 2 of them quietly gossiped about 2 or 3 things about Mo Yunwan's love and hate for her idol for a while, and were just discussing the excitement. Lu Yao, who was proud of his investigative ability, was waving his hands like a gorilla. At this moment, the faint sound of the office chair rollers rolling again was remembered in the quiet office, causing their movements to freeze at the same time. I didn't hear what you said. Why didn't you continue? Mo Yunwan still lay at the table, half closing her eyes. But the office chair has already made a creaking sound as the center of gravity shifts. Lu Yao's hand was still raised high, with his back facing where his attention was, stiff in mid-air. You can only see the stiff facial expression of Xiao Zi in front of you. I also heard a deadly sound coming from behind. Are you very dissatisfied with the investigation results of yesterday's case, or are you very dissatisfied with me occupying your territory early in the morning? Mo Yunwan turned his chair over. No problem. Lu Yao, like a startled bird, turned around and wiped his mouth with his sleeve. Then, with a cold expression, he stood at attention and said seriously, Sister, I arrived early today. Here's this pear for you, it's so sweet. She was about to take out the thing she had just brought in, but she felt empty before realizing that she had just put it at the door. Mo Yunwan rudely reached out and rubbed Lu Yao's hair, but there was no tenderness. Instead, she messed up her shape, making Lu Yao cry out in frustration. The team members arrived one after another. Xiao Zi no longer had any worries and began to bustle around, distributing various foods like a cafeteria lady. Lao Mo, you have caught your roasted wheat and soybean milk. Xiao Zi seemed to remember something and shouted loudly. I casually threw it to Mo Yunwan, who was still occupying Lu Yao's seat. Oh yes, I'm not taking credit. Actually, this was bought by our Liang team. I paraphrased his words, breakfast must be eaten, and once it's done, just throw it into the refrigerator to cushion the stomach. He just came over, put down his things, and left. I'm just saying, boss, why hasn't this point arrived yet? Lu Yao casually answered, suddenly realizing something and looking at the packaging bag in his hand, lost in thought. But why is Liang's team so generous? Every time he sees me go there to pack, he's heartbroken. I can't help but suspect that I'm not eating food, it's gold. She looked around and shrunk her neck, especially today. Why doubt it? Liang didn't do anything good today, he just reported it in advance. He's not like this all the time. Give him a sweet date and slap someone, calculating that he's the best at it. Mo Yunwan was eating breakfast brought by someone while leading the way in creating conspiracy theories for the breakfast delivery person, and let out a click. She was still leaning against Lu Yao's office chair, sitting in a rather unrestrained posture. Perhaps it was because her hair had been tied up all night, causing her to panic. She had just draped her long hair behind her ears and didn't pay much attention to the messy appearance of her hair. In her spare time, she was playing with her hair rope and had already formed a twisted bow that formed its own. I think it's at most that store that offers discounts, such as buying 5 yuan and getting 5 yuan for free, and offering a 20% discount membership card for big deals. Xiao Zi did use his brain, struggling to explain, or just couldn't bear to write suspicions on the face of his team leader. Perhaps it is because the captain surnamed Liang did not have as much humanistic care as usual that the situation appears special. How could it be? That store is so expensive that even time.honored brands can't queue up, so there's no need to offer discounts to attract customers. Lu Yao dragged the fruit basket he brought under his desk, rebutted it with a serious tone, and continued her reasoning confidently by stepping on the chair. Mainly, he also bought the most expensive durian buns, 3 in total. And I have this hobby, it's not very deliberate. It's over, I guess I'm going to get cold. I can try inheriting your legacy. Mo Yunwan wiped his mouth with a piece of paper, patted Lu Yao's shoulder, and casually replied. I think Liang's team is just trying to empathize with their subordinates. It's really a huge injustice to receive such malicious speculation. Lu Yao was about to take the lead in condemning this unsociable person. He turned around and choked before swallowing his words. When I came back, I heard someone choreographing me, which was very extreme and heartwarming. Liang'an walked in from the doorway. He left immediately, maliciously carrying the cold wind pouring in from the ventilation outside, without immediately closing the door. This blow had a chilling effect. Even though the weather was not very pleasant, he seemed to be in a good mood, expressing his grievances and even smiling at the corners of his mouth. Officer Liang is 27 years old this year and serves as the captain of the 3rd Brigade of the Criminal Investigation Brigade of the Yuzhou Municipal Bureau. In this position, he is considered too young and should have been difficult to convince others. It is said that he made great contributions in a major case, and it was precisely when the previous team leader suddenly resigned that he laid the foundation for a career advancement. The senior let go of the nitpicking, and he took over this position in the face of danger. He also led several cases in a row before turning the tables. The achievements were quite remarkable, so no one said a word more at that time, and few people would specifically mention it later on. His appearance is quite standard and upright, with a natural sharpness in his eyes, making him a reliable young man. Perhaps in this person, only their harmonious and stable name appears the most ordinary. There is a case in Linjiang district. It was reported at 4 o'clock, and the other on duty have already passed. I think you guys from Team 1 and Team 2 are quite energetic, so why don't you all come? Liang scanned the surroundings, still with a smile on his face and without hesitation in his movements, driving several people who had just finished breakfast out of the door like sheep. Sitting watching the play, Mo Yunwan was somewhat surprised and looked at Liang who was looking over. Old Jiang and I changed shifts, and now it's over. But there weren't any important cases early in the morning. How could there be any cases left for you in the first and second teams? Do you still have the leisure to snatch the cases? I have my thoughts. But it's not for that. Liang waved his hand and handed his own phone to Mo Yunwan. I have something you want to see, Lao Mo. Are you interested? Don't be too presumptuous. It's disgusting of you to say such things. Where's the salesperson from? I'm going to drive you away. Mo Yunwan's gaze swept over, but suddenly changed after landing in a spot. Her expression stiffened for a moment, as if unsure, and she leaned over to carefully examine each line of text on it. I made a big move for a moment, almost stumbled and fell off my unstable office chair, feeling very embarrassed. This is an unexpected situation that rarely happens to this guy. This place. Your attitude won't be. Her voice was incredulous. That's right. Liang saw Mo Yunwan staring at him with some suspicion and helplessness. Don't think bad of me. I didn't set any traps or harm anyone, it's just a coincidence that surprised me too. Mo Yunwan looked up and didn't believe it. Then I have to thank you and remember to tell me. You have to have a clear idea in your mind. Liang passed by her side and leaned over to remind her to leave. What are you pretending to be here? Mo Yunwan turned her head and sat back in the chair, feeling a bit awkward, holding hands as if recalling something. You took on this case in Linjiang District. TSK. The people from your 3 teams also have some skills, so there shouldn't be any problems. The 3rd Brigade of the Criminal Investigation Brigade of the Yuzhou Municipal Bureau has the smallest number of personnel in the entire bureau, but it is also the team with the highest efficiency in handling cases according to data. Due to the special organization, there are not many tasks in daily life, and they are all scheduled by the team leader. This team belongs to the Criminal Investigation Brigade, which is quite special and mysterious. Strangely, this is a special detachment that is so mysterious that most of us cannot say what different it is. Except for the seemingly less prestigious young captain, who may have unique insights. The deceased's name is Li Jun, 29 years old, living alone. He was found lying down at the entrance between his villa hall and kitchen at 4:16 a.m. on February 26. He had multiple incisions on his body, and the forensic team preliminarily determined that he died from excessive blood loss. The time of death has been temporarily determined to be in the morning of February 25. As soon as he got into the car, Liang heard Lu Yao honestly reading reports from several taxi drivers who had already arrived at the scene. Xiao Song is guarding, not afraid of any problems at the scene. It's just that it's more appropriate for us to take a look at the body later and then transport it back. Xiao Zi casually commanded and noticed a key point. I found the body from a day ago at around 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's still a single man who died in his own house without anyone to care about. The speed of discovery and luck are quite good. The first person discovered was the security guard of the community. While patrolling the community, they noticed something was wrong and opened the curtains. They only pried open the door after discovering the blood stains left on the floor. Liang added. He has gained some understanding of the case. For some reason, he seemed to want to cross the topic and say, lucky is indeed good. But there's no need to delve deeper into this topic. It's not just good, boss. Take a look at the map over there. These people are so torn apart that their neighborhood relationships are probably not very good. Lu Yao was so conflicted about this issue that he chased after her relentlessly, holding the laptop she had bought with a lot of money on her lap, constantly tapping and muttering incessantly. You're not very old, so you're quite worried. Liang exposed the topic. Lu Yao is still a newly graduated intern, with outstanding academic performance in the cultural courses of a prestigious police academy. When contrasted, she was only slightly overshadowed by other subjects at an excellent level, but she did not lose any color. It can only be said that the difference was caused by the contrast, not that she was not outstanding enough. After entering the college entrance examination at the age of 16, he graduated early at the age of 19. She is less than 20 this year, still considered a half-year-old child, but she is a technical talent that Liang finally managed to snatch. Lu Yao's family is considered a small and successful nouveau riche with a lot of spare money. Parents dote on their only daughter, almost always responding to their requests and providing her with the best education. If she had no relevant aspirations, she would probably continue to pursue further studies for a long time, perhaps becoming an extraordinary programmer to fully unleash her slightly extraordinary talents. However, under the unreasonable indulgence, she wanted to pursue the path of becoming a police officer without any obstruction from her parents. She is a broad genius and also a favored child, able to be allowed to do some capricious things. The villa community where the incident occurred was built starting from the last century, with a focus on high-end and atmospheric single-family villa communities. Each home is equipped with a stylish European-style garden to meet the psychological needs of those who aspire to European-style mansions. But no matter how great the imagination may be, this wholesale-style residential area ultimately cannot do without uniform standardized design. At least since entering the community, Liang couldn't distinguish which road was different from the buildings next to it when he looked out of the window. At most, the weeds in the garden were uneven in height, and some of the gardens were planted as green vegetable gardens by leisurely families, maximizing their practical value. Carefully observe, there are also public service advertisements for the 20th anniversary special event of afforestation projects in nearby forest parks posted on the street bulletin board. Due to the large footprint and superior momentum of public service advertising, it has not been completely covered by the various types of small advertisements in gynecological and male hospitals. Therefore, it should still have the effect of advertising widely. The community may have been selling well for a while, but it is too far from the city center and inconvenient for transportation. The uniform housing of the same model and outdated security measures make stylish and privacy-conscious wealthy people uninterested, and affluent families who want occasional vacations also feel that there is a lack of infrastructure here. Almost no one in the target group can be completely satisfied, which can be considered a typical example of not being high enough to be low enough. At first glance, it may seem quite intimidating, but that's all. Retired elderly people live here in cheap villas and the fresh air forest park next door, most of which are long-term idle residences that are temporary rest stations that are only bought by the wealthy for nothing. The car stopped by the sidewalk surrounding the iron fence. Several people got off the car one after another, and Lu Yao also touched the back cover of the computer that was heating up. She carefully put away her precious computer at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. The door of the villa is open. Ignoring the surrounding warning line, this red building should have appeared very majestic, making people feel like they have arrived in a foreign land at first glance. This is clearly a villa development that imitated foreign-style buildings in the old era, which is in line with the popular trend of foreign countries more than a decade ago. However, from the current perspective, it has some pretense of posture. After all, it is still something foreign and does not fit in with local customs. Next to the mahogany gate, the interior area is surrounded by European-style red bricks. Only a small square in front of the door is smooth, and the garden at the entrance, like most of the areas passing by, is covered with clusters of uneven weeds, blocking the crooked brooms and mops at the edge of the square. There is also an old weed killer that has been weathered, and I don't know if it can still be used. I don't know if it was abandoned by the lazy homeowner or if it was just like a clothes hanger from the beginning, and I don't know where to put it and just leave it aside. In front of the open fence door, a tall man heard the sound of a car and turned to look over. He was surrounded by a few curious elderly onlookers, and in the midst of a crowd and chattering speculations, he became a particularly prominent hammer. Standing tall like a flock of chickens, standing in the center of a majestic grandfather and aunt, there is a faint smell of sheep entering the tiger's mouth. But even though he looked a bit embarrassed being surrounded by groups, his face still had an unquestionable firmness, his eyes sharp, as if he had nailed down the 4 big words, no comment, with steel plates. It's really inhumane. In this way of thinking, perhaps the description of a wolf entering a tiger's mouth is more appropriate for him. Although there is not much actual difference. Chapter 2. Fences. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. The warning line was lifted, and several elderly people who were watching and discussing were also persuaded with good words and good spirits, stumbling back home one after another. They were not aware of the fact that this place had turned into a haunted mansion for the time being, and only felt that there must be some undisclosed secrets about this stranger in this besieged mansion. If there is a secret, there is gossip, and if there is gossip, there is talk. How's it going? Is everything going well? Xiao Zi pushed his glasses up from the bridge of his nose, looking like a famous detective in a big movie, and it was extremely stunning. Xiao Zi has been tidying up his hairstyle and clothes since he came out of the door, not to mention giving him time to sit in the passenger car. During this period, he was able to dress himself up completely from head to toe. His hair just got stuck at the required limit length, and after carefully combing and dressing up, his style is unique. Not to mention that, this guy is even wearing a brown woolen plaid coat, with a black sweater lining and delicate gold thread embroidery on the edges, paired with black framed glasses with no degree taken out from somewhere. His appearance is 3 times more prominent and hides a lot of cunning. In the eyes of the parents, this kind of appearance is a reliable young man. A few more gentle and elegant words are enough to make people involuntarily feel that his advice is quite reasonable from the beginning, without much effort. It looks like an ordinary resident who has just moved in to welcome a brand new life, rather than a poor worker who has just finished a night of overtime, was called up early in the morning as a temporary cafeteria ant, and was called around by unlucky leaders to work. In order to continue to be responsible for cleaning up the mess, he was responsible for coaxing away 5 aunties and 3 uncles one by one. Song Qiaoyu stood next to the security guard who claimed to be the first to discover the body. Just rescued from the crowd, his expression remained cold and solemn as usual, but he couldn't help but quietly scrutinize his colleagues from behind, his thoughts surging. The basic investigation of the deceased is like this. The basic information had already been thoroughly gathered by Lu Yao before she could directly provide a rough idea. Li Lijun, male, 29 years old. After finishing his college entrance examination at the age of 18, he went to serve in the military. At the age of 20, his parents passed away one after another, with his father dying of sudden psychogenic death. Due to a great blow, his mother lived alone in a daze and jumped off a building a few days later to commit suicide. Due to the low floor, she was only seriously injured, but due to her poor health, she left after taking care of him for a few days. 1 year later, Li Lijun finished his military service and returned to school to study. During the 4 years, his grades were in good condition. Middle level, unemployed after graduation, living alone to this day. Xiao Zi touched his chin and said, starting from the age of 21, let's calculate it this way. He has been in college for 4 years, and finally graduated at the age of 25. What did he do during these 4 years from the age of 25 to 29? Report to Xiao Gu. He doesn't do anything. He only goes out and doesn't come in. His family thieves have money, and their savings are enough to eat, drink, and have some fun. Lu Yao was interested. We originally lived in a big villa, and even if the villa area wasn't bustling, there were still a lot of property fees every month. Due to the distance between delivery and delivery, it was called running errands, and the delivery fees were also outrageous. If it were like the Liang team, it would be better to starve to death than to order takeout at this distance. After all, the delivery fees are more expensive than the takeout itself. Liang'an was choked for no reason, with an innocent expression. Lu Yao continued, but he still orders takeout every day, which is not frugal. But his parents' inheritance alone is enough for him to live like this for more than a decade. Even if he dies of old age, it's not a problem. But he doesn't have this opportunity anymore. The imitation red brick wall surrounds the house that can accommodate more than 10 families. And in this empty big house, the person who once lived alone for 4 years has turned into a cold corpse. In recent years, he has been living alone. Xiao Zi was a bit skeptical. Without a girlfriend, even if it's roommates or friends living together. Living alone in such a big place, it takes a lot of time just to clean up. No mistake. Look ahead, 4 years ago, the number of takeout orders delivered to this address for each meal was 1, and there was not much change in water and electricity bills. Lu Yao clearly thought of this earlier and flipped through the screenshot on his phone to show Xiao Zi. You see, on average, except for the difference in water used for air conditioning during seasonal changes, the data has not changed. I suspect this person may have become a clockwork robot, and this work is not moving. Really? Liang'an leaned over and asked, then there's a bit of a problem. Lu Yao frowned and suddenly realized something. He also let out a sigh. From the pattern of dining, Li Liejuan's schedule has hardly changed at all. Book breakfast between 5:30 a.m. and 6 o'clock a.m., and it will be delivered around 6:30 a.m. Orders are made between 11:30 and December 2000, noon, and most deliveries are made between 12 o'clock p.m. In the evening, the meal was ordered at 4 o'clock, and the arrival time varied, but it was always delivered. The only variable is sometimes sending messages asking the delivery guy to help take away the trash bag, asking the errand guy to buy some daily necessities. Because the cost of running errands for takeout is really considerable, the guy is also willing to help. It is reasonable to also serve major customers. This arrangement has not been changed once in the past 4 years, until the morning when Li Lijun died. He never missed even a meager meal. Lu Yao repeatedly confirmed the information he had found, but could no longer draw a conclusion with certainty. If you sleep late and are too lazy to eat breakfast, and if you sleep early and eat less than a meal, this degree of problem has never occurred before. Isn't this a bit outrageous? Robots don't work this way, so they have indefinite warranty. If the data is true, although it's unbelievable, we can confirm it temporarily. Xiao Zi rubbed his cold hand. The time the victim was assassinated was probably before 6 o'clock. At least something very special happened before that. I asked the person in charge of the delivery company, and he helped me contact the specialist in the delivery area. Lu Yao's fingers quickly typed on the keyboard, not sure if it was cold or infected by the serious atmosphere. His breath was a bit urgent, breathing in the faint smell of blood in the cold air. He said that Li Liejuan's house does indeed have delivery on time every day, especially on the windowsill of the villa. And sometimes he would ask someone to help throw out the garbage bags thrown outside the window. The door lock and handle are rusty. After opening the window, pulling open the curtains, and discovering suspicious blood stains, the security guard climbed directly into the window. This fence door is actually a decoration, and anyone can enter without a locked fence door. Is that right? Liang'an asked the other person for evidence. Song Qiaoyu still clung to the entrance of the fence door like a door god. After listening to the last sentence, he turned his head and glanced at the security guard beside him. His hearing is very good. The security guard who had been by his side for a long time clearly didn't hear him so clearly. He reacted so quickly and was suddenly mentioned. He was a bit stunned, but nodded again to confirm. After a while, he instinctively glanced towards the back of the villa. Liang'an also took a glance in the direction he was looking, without making a sound. No second person noticed this anomaly. So it's very likely that the deceased never left this villa during these 4 years. Lu Yao's voice was light, but his tone gradually became solemn. At this moment, the few people who had just walked around to survey the body also returned, carrying the collected physical evidence materials. They happened to leave a space at the entrance between the hall and the kitchen, allowing the people standing at the entrance of the villa to truly see the complete body. The pool of blood at the threshold has long dried up, and drops of blood follow a crooked path leading to a corpse on the ground. That is an adult man lying on the marble floor. His body was covered in mottled bloodstains, with countless blood pools and spots scattered all over his body. The clothes were stained with blood and the original color was not visible, only a dark-colored sweater could be faintly seen. Half of the body's face was pressed against the cold floor, while the other half was pale and exposed to the same cold air. The stiff flesh showed dry and grayish-white texture, which was indeed the color of death. Not only his face, but upon closer inspection, his wrists, hands, neck, and the skin on the edges of his plush slippers and feet, wherever exposed without bloodstains, all showed an abnormal white color. That is not just caused by excessive blood loss before death. He lives on the ground, but he doesn't see much light. A retired soldier, a college graduate, who should have a bright future like his peers, is like a mushroom abandoned in a dark corner, even losing his life. The kitchen behind the corpse, from the walls to the underground, had shiny and smooth tiles, with pots, pans, and ladles all in place. However, they were all neatly left and used in the cabinet, just like a cold kitchen utensil museum. Only on the shelf where the entire set of knives was placed, the longest watermelon knife was missing. Liang Andwa glanced at it twice and then walked up the third floor alone. This villa is really large, with 3 floors and even a prepared elevator shaft. Although it has not been put into use, it is expected that elderly customers can install elevators according to their needs, so as not to change the stairs. No matter how abnormal Li Lijun is, he is still a single young man living alone, so there is no need to install an elevator in a 3-story house. The third floor is actually all bedrooms, with 1 master bedroom and 1 secondary master bedroom, plus a huge balcony that can be clearly seen from outside. It is obvious that even Li Lijun himself would not come here on weekdays. In this place, even the stairs are covered with almost undisturbed dust. But the murderer may not have anything to do with this place, but Liang An is still quite interested in this place. When a person dies, especially after an abnormal death, their entire life journey will be analyzed, divided, and sliced into pieces for analysis and interpretation. Li Lijun cannot be said to have been short or long in his life. He had a learning career that was almost indistinguishable from that of ordinary people, a special feature of losing both parents, and the most thought-provoking 4 years. The first floor room has traces of Li Lijun's life, but the master bedroom of the villa is on the 3rd floor, and the second bedroom is also on the 3rd floor. This floor only has these 2 bedrooms. If the master bedroom was where Li Lijun's parents used to live, then in a family of 3, even for the sake of parents taking care of their children, Li Lijun's residence must be the remaining 2nd bedroom on the 3rd floor. What did this person who had been isolated from their parents for 4 years go through during the time they couldn't spend with them? The answer may be in this room. In the room where there has been no one to clean for a long time and dust accumulates everywhere, apart from the wooden bedboard, there are several crowded bookshelves and lonely desks placed. Liang An felt very sad for no reason. It's not that he is sentimental. Just think about a person who pays for the property and utilities of a whole villa, and has been rooted here for 4 years without even having time to foot in half of the villa for a long time. This is really a waste that makes one's chest beat. And he is indeed very curious. The second bedroom is a medium-sized room. Compared to the master bedroom, there is no separate dressing room or a large bathtub that occupies a small compartment, but it can still be considered a sparrow, although it is small and has all the necessary amenities. The desk and single bed of Li Lijun's youth, including several bookshelves filled with various books, and even a small sofa for rest, were all sealed in the dust of the room to look like the past. The desk is empty and dust-free, however, the bookshelf is much livelier than the desk, not only filled with a variety of books, but also showcased with various objects in front of the forcefully inserted books. Toys played by young boys, such as small car models that can slide back and forth for over 10 yuan, small and exquisite wooden blocks, and customized Russian nesting dolls with exquisite eyebrow and eye paintings. Perhaps due to being boys' toys, the eyelashes are not drawn long, so looking for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com may seem a bit rustic. The heavy black package hanging at the top of the bookshelf, due to the owner's carelessness in opening half of the zipper, contained not only dust that fluttered with the vibration of the fabric with a gentle tap, but also a Russian imported bird-watching telescope. Li Lijun may be a nostalgic person, but obviously not a particular person. These objects are randomly placed in various corners of the bookshelf, creating a mess. Unfortunately, his desktop is so flat, except for a sticky note that may have lost its stickiness due to prolonged storage, which is filled with messy handwriting that is difficult to read. It's like the owner of the table, at a certain moment, getting a special reward and taking care of it thoroughly. Suddenly, it was permanently dusted off and locked in a dark room, becoming a sealed relic. The disharmony here is not just limited to this aspect. Liang raised his hand and lightly landed his gloved fingers on the bookshelf, trying to avoid his own touch from damaging the dust that had been accumulated here. He moved the plastic funnel that had accumulated dust at the edge of the bookshelf, revealing the scene behind him completely. University textbooks, high school tutoring books, and even some college entrance exam exercise books are neatly arranged in piles under the dust. The spine of these old books is covered in dust, some are dilapidated, and some look like they have been unpacked and never opened again. They are obviously unnecessary and have no reason to be constantly used, only to prove that the owner of the house really has no special requirements for what books are on the bookshelf. In the corner of the bookshelf, a clean and new book was set inside, mixed with a group of dusty bookshelves with blurred side seals. In this dusty room, it stands out like a pearl falling into the dust. Chapter 3. Disappearance. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Stray Birds. That different book has already been taken out. Liang'an has certainly heard of this name. This is a small collection of poems by the poet Tagore, published 10 years ago. For most people, it's like many familiar Enlightenment poems that most people know. In the classroom of compulsory education. They exist, they are important, and they are closely related to human aesthetics, but they really seem insignificant in the ordinary lives of the next few decades, like castles in the air. Only a few people with a literary passion can truly know them by heart and savor every word. Liang'an briefly flipped through it. This is a publication from over a decade ago, and there is nothing particularly special about it. The entire book only has the outermost corner of the bottom right corner of the title page, with Li Liejuan's own name written in a font and pen that looks quite exaggerated to a normal person. Liang'an himself doesn't have much research on fonts, but subjectively, he feels like every stroke is trying to float to the sky with a font, and after searching for signature on a web page, the template on the bold and italicized 2 pieces for custom art signature, small advertisement pops up is not much different. Instead of carefully admiring this exquisite collection of poems for a while, he chose to go downstairs first. At this moment, Xiao Zizheng couldn't get past the patrolling security guards. What we see is what we see, what we don't see is what we don't see. We're not in a hurry, let's talk carefully. Xiao Ziming spoke slowly, but his eyes were somewhat sharp, as if he urgently wanted to knock on the security guard's not very clever head to see what was inside. You have to stop thinking about what you saw before discovering the body. Why did you think about opening the window to check, and what did you think was wrong? Liang'an felt as if he was witnessing the teaching scene of a frustrated teacher educating a student who couldn't think of solving problems. Security guard Xiao Zhang is in his 20s, with a strong physique and a relatively tall stature. Although he was about the same height as Song Qiaoyu, this young man didn't have that person's fierce appearance. Instead, he was stunned and somewhat naive. In front of Xiao Zi, who was half a head shorter than him, he seemed to have no courage, just stuttering and repeating words that he intuitively felt were not right. It is indeed not in line with common sense. Liang'an came over and patted Xiao Zi's shoulder to show comfort, then looked at the tall man who was at a loss. Let's put the specific matters aside for now. Xiao Zhang, how do you arrange your patrol time? Have you found any abnormal situations near here during yesterday and today's patrols? Xiao Zhang is granted amnesty. We usually patrol at February 2000, noon and 4 o'clock a.m., and we usually arrive here when we call the police. It's around 4:46 a.m. and 2:40 a.m., and it only takes more than 40 minutes without any accidents. Besides regular patrols, I and the other 2 security guards watch for 8 hours alone at the security booth, and we ask for help to keep an eye on it during patrols. However, there are records of cars entering the door, surveillance cameras for people entering, and scattered decorations on the street. Police comrades have already been dispatched to investigate this time. Xiao Zhang's thoughts were very clear. Although he still lowered his head, he continued to chatter like a bean, stuttering a bit. However, he couldn't help but look at Xiao Zi's face, afraid that he might say the wrong thing and cause trouble for the teacher again. Usually, it's me and another security guard who are each responsible for one time. I patrol at noon, and that one is in the early morning. Today, he felt unwell and asked me to replace him. I didn't think too much, just felt something was wrong. I don't need you to explain this for now. Keep going, you've noticed any issues before. Liang'an felt a little helpless. When I was patrolling at noon, I saw that the door was open. I didn't think there was any problem at the time, so I stopped for a moment. I took a look and walked over. You could have noticed something was wrong with the villa with the door closed at 4 a.m., but at noon you saw the door open and just walked away like that. Xiao Zi still couldn't believe it. Liang'an raised his hand to signal the gradually declining Xiao Zhang to continue speaking. Then it rained in the afternoon, and before the shift changed, I was idle watching. There wasn't really much to watch, there were only a few dozen cars and not many people in the afternoon, all old men and women running to the forest park outside for a stroll. That's all for our convenience. It's close to the forest park, and the air is the best after it rains. However, there are also a few parents taking shelter in the security booth when it rains. As I got older and got wet again, I thought I would go and make a pot of tea to warm my body, so that the old man wouldn't catch a cold. At that time, the gatekeeper might not have been as focused, but there was still surveillance footage, police officer. The camera wouldn't have missed anyone, right? Xiao Zhang felt a bit guilty and also a bit aggrieved. He was quite big and obedient, looking quite funny. It's hard to tell that this silly little Zhang is quite enthusiastic, and even Xiao Zi's harsh expression, which has been tormented for a long time, has eased a bit. To be honest with you, this is really desolate. It was okay more than a decade ago, but now it's good to have 10 households for every 100 villas. The rest are either waiting for price increases or wanting to rent out because they are too far from the city center. Fortunately, there is only one gate, and besides us, only a few cleaning ladies came over to clean up the street over the weekend. Now with advanced technology, every beep of a car entering will be automatically recorded, you know. There is also a surveillance camera on the person entering, which can capture the front view. There are not many people who don't take the bus now, and the ones who go out will be counted separately. Except for those who don't know each other, there's nothing else to do, and it's actually considered idle. The transportation is also inconvenient, and the maintenance personnel are not very willing to come here. However, it happens that we are making some extra money. A few days ago, I went to help repair the air conditioning for Sister 1023. This little security guard used to be a talkative person by nature, and he spoke a bit too badly. A few nagging words completely exposed himself, and his head was not lowered. I mean, during yesterday's noon patrol, was there any difference between what you saw here and before? Xiao Zhang's expression was a bit confused, not quite understanding what it meant. He blinked his eyes and pointed to the redwood door. The door is open. It's also open now, not right, it's with me in the early morning. I mean now, compared to yesterday noon, Liang'an corrected. Xiao Zhang scratched his head, as if looking for something different in his mind, but he really didn't have any ideas. We're here. Liang'an walked to the fence door with a few people. You were patrolling at this position, weren't you? Since you didn't think there was anything wrong with the door open, why did you stop and take a look? Liang'an still remembers the phrase he said, patiently inducing. At this moment, Song Qiaoyu, who was going to check the surveillance footage, walked back briskly from across the street. Xiao Zhang stood in front of the fence door, looking a bit confused, trying to reproduce the scene at that time. At that time. Think about it, just treat this place as before. Liang lowered his voice, turned over, glanced at the decorations next to the door and Song Qiaoyu walking by, and gestured to Xiaozi not to move. Song Qiaoyu walked briskly and quickly walked to the side. He didn't hear what they said, he just looked at the suspicious crowd of people looking towards the villa with a strange expression. He didn't stop his footsteps and walked a few steps closer to the fence door, passing by Xiao Zhang and stepping on the stone steps connecting the outside world and the small square. Hey you! Xiao Zhang seemed to have not yet escaped from the situation, and immediately froze, as if he had remembered something. Song Qiaoyu was not scared either, just like a cat that had been furrowed in the opposite direction, he stood still and turned his head. Do you remember? Liang An's voice sounded, and Song Qiaoyu realized that the situation was not ordinary. At that time, the stone steps were very clean, as if they had been washed with water, and there was still a lot of water that hadn't dried up. Xiao Zhang's thoughts gradually became clear, and he spoke faster and faster, word by word, confidently saying, there were also brooms and mops on the square. I thought if I walked over, I would definitely step on the floor that was not easy to clean, and others would mop it in vain, so I just left. I thought. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon at that time, as you said, it hadn't rained yet. Xiao Zi squinted his eyes and examined this area, which was only slightly different from yesterday noon. At this moment, Liang'an was lost in thought. There was no rain before noon, and the clean and damp stone steps must have been caused by someone. Even with a rough estimate of the time of death, it can be basically determined that the deceased is already lying on the edge of his kitchen. So creating this phenomenon where the door is open but the security guard Xiao Zhang doesn't even get close to this infrequently open door is the killer's intention. Xiao Zhang is obviously a warm-hearted idiot. It goes without saying that the former is also easy to understand. It is reasonable for kind-hearted elderly people to take the initiative to invite them to the security booth to take shelter from the rain, and even to offer to help cook a pot of hot tea, fearing that others' cleaning results will be destroyed and time will pass. If it were a different person, even with a little less subconscious consideration, or a security guard who is not so kind-hearted, experienced, capable, and very vigilant, there might not necessarily be such a brain circuit. What would someone see if they realized something was wrong and broke in at this moment? Is this not a coincidence, but rather an imagination? Song Qiaoyu returned with Lu Yao's lifeline computer. In the distance behind him, there was also little tail Lu Yao, who was crying because his steps were not big enough and he didn't run fast enough, and his lifeline was taken away. Liang'an suddenly remembered that he had just asked to bring the surveillance footage as soon as possible. This big brother surnamed Song is really serious and focused. It took some time to copy the video. It was a whole day on February 1st, summarizing the license plate numbers of vehicles entering and exiting the community, as well as the corresponding time. Song Qiaoyu held the computer and coldly allowed Lu Yao to pull the edge of the computer and pretend to be pitiful. The videos of pedestrians and vehicles entering and exiting are also here, totaling hundreds of people, which can be checked one by one. There are protective power grids on the surrounding walls, even though our security is not very good due to insufficient personnel. But the electricity is always on. The security guard is also a sincere person. Liang'an temporarily detached himself from his thoughts and gave Song Qiaoyu a look that could be described as complex, or perhaps slightly regretful. Troubleshooting is possible, but don't hold on to too much hope. Song Qiaoyu blinked, somewhat skeptical. Let's go around and take a look at the surrounding environment later. The area around is an open forest park that hasn't been inspected in over a decade. Liang smiled bitterly, this is an old bridge section. At this moment, Lu Yao finally took the opportunity to snatch the computer back. She was threatened by evil forces. First, she comforted the little bump of her baby who was suddenly kidnapped, and then silently saved the precious information that Song Qiaoyu had handcuffed back with a dirty expression on her baby. At the same time, another survey data was opened during the file transfer process. In recent years, Li Lijun has indeed been living a regular life and never goes out. He goes to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, but he not only spends money on food, drink, and other things online. After Lu Yao retrieved a series of consumption records from bank savings cards and payment software, he opened up another colorful interface. He has made money on many online platforms, a wealthy player who can easily handle 7 or 8 648. His expenses for the past year have been concentrated on this MMORPG PC client game, or in other words, a large-scale multiplayer online role-playing game. This was released last year and is called The Land of Slaying Spirits. The popularity hasn't completely dissipated yet, it's quite popular. He has recharged at least 200,000 yuan on it, so burning money. Xiao Zi exclaimed in surprise. In his perception, this kind of entertainment consumption is simply not as good as buying a few more clothes. This kind of game is like this one is really worth it. Lu Yao began to ramble on, what weapons, equipment, and appearances are all expensive items. However, the quality of this game is decent, the character's storyline is exquisite, the impact is good, the graphics are very realistic and delicate, and the fashion is also very beautiful. So he didn't just abandon all socializing, but instead focused his life on gaming. That's right. I'm good at it. I calculated the card money he spent, and it's similar to being online 24 hours a day. This game is a bit cheesy. But it's not that outrageous either. Lu Yao's performance was like a shark stranded in the river for half a year being thrown into the sea, confident and proud. This surprisingly proactive expression made Liang Anrua ponder. Have you played before, how are you? Is it fun? Liang patted his chin. Lu Yao suddenly felt a chill in his chest and a flurry in his heart, feeling a bit guilty. His gaze slowly moved and he quietly glanced at the speaker, weakly and helplessly covering her precious lump. Chapter 4. Conflict. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. Liang certainly cannot engage in activities that damage his image by robbing computers. Although Lu Yao is playful, he never affects his work. At this point in time, computers are still more valuable in the hands of professional Lu Yao. He is now concerned about another matter. It's already noon now, with scorching sunshine. Strangely, Li Liejuan's address book only contains the phone numbers of his deceased parents. Among various social media apps, there are only classmates and teachers from their college years, and most of them have never had a single sentence of contact in the past few years. Only the cadres who organized student gatherings have persistently sent out invitations to him every year in the same month. But perhaps due to never receiving any response, this kind of news has also stopped since last year. As Li Lijun no longer has direct relatives, his closest relative, his cousin, only had a childhood encounter with him and agreed to come from a distant city to collect his body, and also verbally allowed the autopsy to take place. Li Liejuan's body has been transported back to the team and underwent examination on the dissecting table. Mo Yunwan, who had started working early, just called and Yun attended this brief meeting. The time management of the team led by Liang has always been extremely amazing. I don't know from whom I contacted, so I temporarily borrowed the security duty booth. The rest room of the security duty booth is quite spacious, and the sound insulation is also good. It can be said that it is a high-end residential area in the planning, and the foundation is still good. He did indeed die from excessive bleeding. In total, he was stabbed 27 times from the back, with the same weapon and a serrated dagger on the blade. The knife was very harsh, probably because every wound caused by the first few cuts was a piercing wound. With this strength and ability to subdue, the perpetrator is likely a strong adult man, of course, not excluding a small number of women who have undergone special training. Mo Yunwan's description over the phone remained as rigorous and merciless as ever. Other things being said, there must be something special about this person. He really lacks exercise and doesn't look like a retired soldier, and he doesn't see light. He probably has to be thin and pale before he dies. Not the kind of white powder decoration that celebrities have when they appear on camera, without any other color luster. It's very pathological. Liang remembered Li Liejuan's ID photo. That was taken when he was in college and also after retiring from the military. He is still a healthy young man with skin that is a common color among yellow people, leaning towards bronze due to exposure to the sun. Although his expression was somewhat deliberately solemn, overall he was still a young man full of fitness and vitality. A pale, sickly, emaciated, and cold corpse. It's him 4 years later. In the past and present, it feels like two people at two extremes. What made him like this? Who made him die in such a tragic way in the 4th year of self-indulgence? In college, he studied finance-related majors. His grades were average, and he maintained a relatively above-average level. His relationship with his mentor and classmates was also relatively healthy, and there were no particularly familiar people. No one had heard him mention whether he had a girlfriend or not. Basically, he had a mediocre relationship with everyone as a gentleman. In their impression, what kind of person is Li Lijun? Liang pondered for a while before looking up and asking. Doing things is very reliable, there's nothing special about it, but it's definitely not a problem to ask him for help. However, I rarely participate in group activities and try my best to push them away. Another thing, it's very strange. Lu Yao retrieved the saved high school student files of Li Lijun and said, after I asked and compared them, I realized something was wrong. Then I specifically asked someone. Look here. In the column of awards received by Li Lijun in terms of cultural and sports, the gold medal in the men's high school group of the city-level 100-meter sprint and the bronze medal in the men's high school group of the provincial-level 100-meter sprint are shining brightly. He had a college classmate who was a sports committee member back then. I noticed that the person's attitude seemed to have some objections to Li Lijun, so I asked a few more questions. Lu Yaofan looked at the various news he had gathered from his individual interviews. He said that in his freshman year, there was a physical fitness test, and he saw that Li Liejuan's performance in the 50-meter event was particularly outstanding, just in time to register for the colonel's games. In order to improve his class performance, he privately contacted Li Lijun to exchange ideas and see if he had any intention of participating in the sprint event. And then what? Then, Li Lijun suddenly had a particularly strong reaction. According to the description, he was like going crazy and flipped the table on the spot. Physically flipping, not an adjective, which scared people to think he was sick. Then he apologized and said that his body was not suitable for vigorous exercise. Isn't this just a lie at first glance? He had just finished his military career and had muscles all over his body, and his physical test results were already impressive like an athlete. Perhaps it was because he was afraid of lifting the table again and felt that he was being deceitful and uncomfortable. Since then, the sports committee has kept a respectful distance from him. Li Lijun doesn't have any mental problems, does he? Xiao Zi rubbed his chin, PTSD. Does he have any special experiences in the military camp? If we had to investigate this in detail, the required authority would have been higher. Lu Yao tried to straighten out the half-hung headphones. She replied directly based on the memories she had seen at a glance before, at least according to the normal records. His 3 years in the military were basically a normal military life, and he also participated in some sports events normally. I remember his grades were still good, just slightly worse than his high school grades. His decline may also be due to not continuing training. If you have to say something special, it's losing your father and mother. But in the military, at least the most basic mental health is something that people pay attention to. If there are problems, they should not go unnoticed for a whole year. At this moment, there was a ding-dong message prompt sound outside Lu Yao's computer, and he quickly picked it up. What about the deceased's current interpersonal relationships? Xiao Zi pointed to the icon of the game that had just been downloaded on Lu Yao's computer desktop. For example, does he have any friends who often play games together? No matter how much Xiao Zi is at the forefront of fashion when it comes to changing clothes, he is ultimately separated from the vast majority of people present by a few generations and is not very familiar with the gaming customs of these young people. It's not that easy to investigate this matter, Lu Yao complained as he clicked on the game icon. Xiao Gu, you don't know. Nowadays, large-scale role-playing online games, in other words, are large-scale blind date social service platforms, and may also have part-time payment services such as leak harvesting. The plan is very deep. The number of friends per person starts at 200, and the amount of communication information has to be classified from the methods of clearing dungeons together to the online emotional entanglements of love and affection. The problem is not just that. Some people just chat on public channels without corresponding chat partners, and this part of the information is like searching for a needle in a haystack. Who knows who they are talking to and who they are talking to? Even sending an emoji can be considered social, and there are also people who use emojis to chat. As he spoke, the screen displayed the character information of the same area code that Lu Yao had borrowed from a friend before. That was a blonde and blue-eyed pastor girl. Her fashion was sparkling with bright and blind light, and her non-mainstream bangs blocked most of her pretty pinched face. She also had a huge green butterfly hanging on her head. Seeing it, Xiao Zi frowned instantly, not knowing what kind of trendy aesthetic it was for young people. It has been proven that Lu Yao has indeed played this game and is a server-opening player. But as a seasoned gamer with a 3-minute popularity and accumulated knowledge through the number of games, her own account has long been idle and she just borrowed a server account from former netizens in the game group, which is the same as Li Liejuan's. Entering the game interface, the character can only see a realistic vast forest around them. In the distance, at the end of the horizon, lies a Western-style castle. I have already found a lot of related chat data from the game company and tried my best to extract effective social information that can be filtered out. Lu Yao skillfully operated the character, rode his horse to the safe area, and also found Ma Chao in his backpack to feed him. This game is based on a point card system, but Li Liejun is really not afraid of burning money. I feel heartbroken when I watch it. It's like playing and burning real gold and silver. Point card games are available 24 hours a day, and a large part of the time is purely idle, but there is also a lot of playing. I see that he often has records of PvP or dungeons, as well as many guild activity records. He is a seasoned player who plays with dedication. Generally speaking, this type of player should have their own circle, but I cannot guarantee that the possible culprit is within the circle. But for this person who lacks normal social interaction, this is also the only possible investigation direction for us at present. You can continue. Liang took the conversation and moved away, letting Xiao Zi come over and carefully examine it. Can this outfit go with something else? Xiao Zi finally couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed. Song Qiaoyu stood behind Xiao Zi without any obstacles, taking advantage of his height and vision to watch. He just came back from outside and the efficiency of verification was really high. He just had a stinky face, his clothes were still a bit dirty, and even a leaf fell into his hood. Li Liejuan's ID is called Crazy Jack. Lu Yao smacked his lips as he entered the name from the friend search column. This name belongs to a random ID, and it's the same when entering the game without changing the name yourself. Adding adjectives and any commonly used Western name, such as Peter, Susan, Lucy, etc. People who don't usually play seriously or play small accounts are usually so casual, but their real name information is indeed only for this character. This game is certified by real name and can only be played at the age of 18, and other games cannot be played. It's possible to change the name. It's over 60 yuan, which shouldn't be a big deal for Li Jun, but he doesn't have the idea. The names of his characters are mostly listed on the various leaderboards of this server, either in the top 3 or in the top 10. Humph, the fishing system of this game is so boring and perfunctory that he was scolded out of the circle. He can even reach the top spot on the fishing list, and his total score is still more than 30 times that of the second place. How boring this is compared to usual. Lu Yao returned to the investigation of interpersonal relationships and handed over the computer with the game character logged in to Xiao Zi, who was interested in novelty. She frowned as she looked at 1,000 quiet friends on her friend list, forcing herself to exclude them one by one. How can he find the people he knows? Song Qiaoyu couldn't bear to watch Xiao Zi's actions and turned to look at Lu Yao's dense and dizzying documents. Can he really know so many of these over 1,000 people? These are the total of his guild and friend lists, and the normal user limit is only 200. However, there is a difference in the amount of money players, and the limit of 1,000 is already full. Lu Yao felt a headache as he looked at the colorful and varied IDs. Then I'll contact the president of his guild first and ask about the situation. Li Jun has an average of over 30 chat messages per day. It may seem like a lot, but when it comes to his all-weather gaming time, it doesn't seem very frequent. The content is also very limited, usually either good or not, basically not exceeding 1 word. The slightly longer part is either collecting materials, recruiting dungeon teammates, or even providing dungeon strategies by directly posting the address. No wonder, with the same amount of time he spent living in the game, there were not many close friends, which was enough for Lu Yao to easily find his familiar partner. Select the part where he replied, "Good," Liang instructed in a loud voice. Okay. This word is often a response to someone mentioning something. But compared to commonly used modal particles such as, and oh, it has an additional layer of more active meaning. For a person who is not extroverted from a data perspective, and may even be overly isolated, even a subtle initiative may represent a more approachable or positive attitude compared to others. In contrast, is more about receiving notifications, while generally adds some negative attitudes on top of the former. Although these attitudes may not necessarily apply to everyone, using them as simple judgment methods usually won't cause major problems. This attitude may not necessarily be towards people, but may also be towards things. For a single player who regards games as their daily routine, many game activities from start to finish only require operations without any communication. Generally speaking, valuing means being important, while being important is being unusual. Surprisingly, there were even more good parts in Li Liejuan's conversation than the other 2 special examples combined. Lu Yao filtered out several relevant dialogues. Most of the conversations take place within the game's guilds, including duels between guilds, the exploration of new dungeons, and the PK between game players. The process showed astonishing consistency, with someone inviting Crazy Jack and Crazy Jack accepting the invitation with a good response. But he is a rather aloof high player, and there is no special person in the intimate relationship system of the game, nor has there been any substantial chat content. But according to the content of this record, he has never refused someone else's request once, but there is no other social interaction content, and even turned a blind eye to the greetings and close relationships of others. Liang finally spoke out and asked in an exploratory manner, why? Because he is just not good at socializing, but is more easygoing. Song Qiaoyu, who is not easygoing and does not know whether he can socialize, obviously cannot understand this behavior, just trying to analyze. From the moment he heard Song Qiaoyu's question, Lu Yao lowered his eyes and looked at the screen, seeming lost in thought. Normally, even the most easygoing person has a bottom line. This acceptance frequency is abnormal. Those who can persist in locking themselves in a house and playing games non-stop for several years are obviously not normal people. Liang gestured for her to continue. There are two possibilities. First, Li Lijun has a strong emotional attachment to the players of this game, but he is too embarrassed to get closer. Second, Li Lijun has a certain degree of paranoia about accepting requests from others. But obviously, Li Lijun has no sense of belonging to his gang. Find Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Look here, the gang where Li Lijun works has a hostile gang that fights every 3 days. Although Li Lijun has been participating in activities in a gang, he often plays with the fixed high-level player dungeon teams of enemy gangs. Collective conflicts may not necessarily be linked to individuals. Xiao Zi frowned. He did not understand the grudges and grievances in these games, but relationships can be analogized. Indeed, there is such a situation. Lu Yao bit a few words very hard, raised his eyes, pondering, but in reality, if you find that your good friends who are aware of it maintain a long-term and stable cooperative relationship with your father's murderer, will you have no barrier in your heart? Liang coughed twice. How much revenge is playing a game? Is it so exaggerated? Xiao Zi hugged his arm. The emotions in the game are many times more intense than in reality. Lu Yao frowned. You can go kill the dog a few times to vent your anger or curse him for hours because he lost the game due to hanging up the game. But what do you do in reality that is dragged back by people who fish in troubled waters? You still need to persuade them with good words and good spirits. This roughly indicates that. Liang gazed at the flashy game interface and the colorful messages scrolling through the world channel. Li Lijun played this game not because he loved it too much or as an alternative social tool, but because of a paranoid acceptance of requests. It was also because of a unilateral, closed social behavior. He is not addicted to the game itself or its social attributes, but rather to feedback on requests from others in the game. For him, a person who, for some reason, does not leave his home 24 hours a day, it is as simple as ever. At this moment, Liang suddenly had a bold idea. Chapter 5. Controversy. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Li Lijun may be a vengeful leader who always responds to his requests, but Song Qiaoyu is definitely not a patient and kind person. Even Xiao Zi couldn't help complaining about the name and character of this man. The former reminds people of the gentle Jiangnan style, with small bridges flowing and drizzling rain. Each word is soft and gentle, even giving the first impression of a gentle Jiangnan girl's maiden name. However, the latter, apart from not being a girl at all, is not only not gentle, but also not elegant, straightforward but also clearly resentful. More like the less positive portrayal of upright characters in martial arts novels, with absolute justice and absolute stubbornness. This person is like a cold stone, heavy and hard, capable of making a big hole even if it hits the ground. However, Song Qiaoyu is not a great hero, and Li Lijun should not be considered to have Madonna's disease. They do not resonate with each other due to some subtle commonalities that do exist. People never easily put disgust on their faces, even in the gaming world. Venting a small dissatisfaction is not very attractive compared to preserving the surface of one's face. While Song Qiaoyu was trying to use his last patience to carefully listen to the description of how Jack had put in a lot of effort and cooperated with himself in the construction of the gang, as well as his plan to expand his vision in the gaming world, an effective message of saving people from fire and water hit Song Qiaoyu's face, who urgently needed normal clues. Indeed, it is a face of disrespect, and both the young and the old are fair. Suddenly appearing and domineeringly occupying half of the screen, the banner bars and special effects almost made Song Qiaoyu think that something unknown was wrong with Lu Yao's precious notebook. Upon closer inspection, it was discovered that amidst a rain of pink special effects petals, there was a small horn logo and a section of glittering special effects border decoration that flashed into the eyes. Surprise, surprise, new melon, everyone come here. Love, 3 mothers and 1 man, the king of 2 minds, the Jack boss, Love, who topped the 6 lists in 818 and cheated people with a big hand. Eat melon sisters, see you. Drool, star eyes, melon is not ripe, no money. At first glance, Song Xiaoyu indeed felt that people's minds were a bit confusing now, and even felt embarrassed to the point of goosebumps for others at inappropriate times. But Jack and 1 or 2 keywords on the list make it impossible for him to miss out on this research direction. It has been proven that the name Jack indeed refers to the subject of investigation, the crazy Jack, big shot. The pop.up speaker had only been playing for a few minutes, but the gossip posts were already in full swing. The latest trend is that this post was just a reply, and within a few minutes, it has gone through dozens of posts, growing rapidly at a visible speed. It seems that the effect of special effects bombing is indeed significant. This is a post posted a few hours ago, and the relevant content has already been discussed in detail. The speaker also repeatedly plays it as if it's free of charge. It has been proven that no matter how popular the random nickname Crazy Jack may be, the emotional entanglement between a wealthy, idle, and powerful top scorer in a cryptocurrency game and others is still quite eye-catching. In this world, everyone is a type of person who doesn't mind the big picture just by watching the excitement. At the beginning, there is a character panel of Crazy Jack hanging up and a screenshot of many eye-catching charts, dazzling with envy. The owner of the post claims to be a ghostwriter and is a friend of the parties involved. He used to worship the character of Big Shot, Li Lai Jun, who is known as Old Jack in the game. This person tells a heart-wrenching love story from the perspective of a female assassin who was deceived into a relationship. At least from Song Xiaoyu's perspective, it seems like this. The story is from the first perspective, filled with various touching psychological descriptions, like a romantic novel with bizarre emotional lines. Song Xiaoyu read the entire article narrated in first person without looking askance, scrolling through the interface in 10 lines. Ignoring all unnecessary adjectives, the story plot is very simple. The female assassin and Old Jack got to know each other because of the PvP gameplay match, and the two of them had a heart-to-heart battle at the end of each month for the top single-player match. Although Old Jack has always been silent, there is indeed a situation of secret competition. After all, according to the records retrieved here, he spent almost all of his gaming time on the last day of each month in the arena. In the words of the poster author, the relationship between the two heated up during their love and killing. Then the female assassin resolutely gave up her former ideal of being a lone wolf and joined Old Jack's gang, starting gang activities every Monday. This part of the logic is normal and reasonable. The subsequent plot is clearly mixed with many subjective colors, like lying under the person's desk and peeping at the content written afterwards. For example, Jack is a female assassin who deliberately cheats on emotions, harbors malicious intentions, and hangs a confession, causing people to display fireworks. After accepting the confession, her communication with other characters is abnormal. The most outrageous thing is that the 3 women in the title have been exposed by omnipotent netizens for many problems. In addition to the female assassin herself, there is a male archer account who is of unknown gender but always likes to whimper on the public screen, and even a well-known female account who often sings voice songs on the public screen, attracting both male and female audiences. The most important thing is that none of the 3 rumored targets have any real hammers other than teaming up and fighting. The poster has attached a bunch of intimidating dungeon records, but they are all just records. Let people directly call the title party. At the end, the ending was somewhat hasty. Old Jack went missing while playing, was not online for a long time, and was accused of cheating money and relationships. The discussion on the posts was lively, with some people fiercely attacking the scumbag, some questioning the authenticity of the 3 women, and some simply showing interest in the top-ranked person, believing that such a person does not need to engage in these flashy operations to deceive cigarette lighters into spending money. I still have doubts about whether the actual identity is Jack's angry laptop or the game controller used by the female assassin to express her longing, if I could know so much in detail. There are diverse opinions and intense discussions. Absurd speculations are flying in the sky, becoming increasingly intense. Only Song Qiaoyu knew that the high-tech player at the center of the topic had mysteriously and tragically died in his own villa. But after reading Li Liejuan's pages filled with various dull and good chat records, Song Qiaoyu really didn't think that the story was told objectively and even doubted the authenticity and purpose of the matter. Who can deceive a girl into brushing fireworks with just the words, and good? Even skilled fraudsters like Liang'an cannot achieve it. Can we still use these two words to create a sentimental binary code, and then let the confessed actively crack it, or simply compose a love song with music? Song Qiaoyu didn't understand. He was very confused, so Song Qiaoyu decided to give the name of the female assassin a key star to Lu Yao for investigation. What he noticed in this story, apart from the few women, were other characters, even more suspicious when guessing with ordinary thinking. That is the bound dungeon T of the female assassin, which is the PvE dungeon player responsible for being beaten and attracting hatred. A male swordsman. In the words of the landlord, the male swordsman, female assassin, and old Jack are members of a fixed dungeon team and have a romantic relationship with the female assassin. Song Qiaoyu is really not good at analyzing cases from the perspective of emotional entanglement. But due to Li Liejuan's poor interpersonal network, he also knows that this kind of hostility, similar to a rival relationship, is very worth exploring in thought-provoking. In common sense, this cruel form of injury is unlikely to occur without certain emotional conflicts. Even for Song Qiaoyu, who is most impatient with emotional entanglements, it is difficult to ignore this obvious fact. He retrieved the photos of the body he had taken, examined and scanned the wounds on it with an inquisitive gaze, and simulated the entire process of murder in his mind. The door opened in the early morning, and the person outside was holding a knife. The person who opened the door tried to escape, but could not avoid the blade waving tightly behind him. What's wrong? It's really miserable, it's a total of $30.7. After checking, I feel like this person's death was not easy. Unfortunately, there are reactions to life, and people lose too much blood. Before death, they should not be very comfortable. It's really cruel, even walking doesn't make people feel happy. Song Qiaoyu looked up. Mo Yunwan leaned against the door and was looking out with her head fixed. After scanning her eyes casually, she closed the door again. The door is not closed, so I'll come and do some work. Close the door. You have to thank me, Mo Yunwan casually looked around. Your temporary office conditions are good, and you also have a meeting room. You can live here just a few steps away from the kitchen. Oh, I have a lighter here, can I light a fire? Song Qiaoyu doesn't really want to hear such nonsense. You don't have a job, he exclaimed. Want to solve a case on your own? Let me help you. The murder weapon is a dagger, which is usually used for camping in the wilderness based on experience. The blade has serrations, making it very convenient for making small tools. I wonder if I can give you some tips. Mo Yunwan asked herself. There was premeditation. Song Qiaoyu frowned. The killer brought a knife and used the environment to avoid the camera to come to the community, and then started directly at the door. Utilize the environment. For over a decade, no one has conducted a proper inspection, relying solely on security patrols in the desolate suburban community. Outside is a forest park. The entire area is surrounded by beautiful sightseeing trees, with the thickest two people embracing each other to enclose them. Almost all of these trees are around this villa area, and it is inevitable that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 trees that are easy to climb into. There is also a afforestation project. More than a decade ago, they may have been just saplings, not even planted yet, without any threat in others' eyes. Song Qiaoyu squinted his eyes and said, although most of this is not my guess, Xiao Zi is not someone who eats dry rice. He will use evidence to make things more clear from beginning to end. Maybe. Mo Yunwan tilted her head as if she had understood what he was thinking. Don't worry, I'm not sent by Liang'an to pick on you. Solve the case well, I'll slip away. Song Qiaoyu looked over and was somewhat concerned. I'm here to visit friends. Do you still forget your old friendship? Song Qiaoyu couldn't help but blurt out. Mo Yunwan gave him a strange glance. Please get rid of your stereotypical impression of this elderly community. Do you want to come together? Don't be so intimidated by the boss. Old men and women passing by will be sued. It can be seen that this person's stereotype is also quite deep. Song Qiaoyu's intuition was not a good thing, and his body instinctively shifted back, warning, no, I can't. Then you will regret missing a good play, Mo Yunwan sighed, feeling sorry for his missed opportunity. Liang'an, who was suspected of performing a good performance, felt good at this moment, perhaps because he had finally achieved the desired result. This is a laboratory. Countless instruments from different fields surround the basement, resembling a huge museum. Nevertheless, the cleaning here is exceptionally clean. In the center of the room, there is an operating table that is as clean as new as the surroundings. Finally, one was found during the inspection. Xiao Zi breathed a sigh of relief as he stared at the same thing for too long, feeling dizzy. He sat slumped on the side inside. This is really not something that people did. If it weren't for this equipment being really top-notch, I would have gone on strike on the spot. It's really a race against time job, truly you. But how could there be such a precious personal laboratory in this damn place? The accessories are strange, not to mention how many tens of thousands this room costs. I envy it so much. When can we buy such a decent instrument? Boss, do you also know a magical Dr. Agari? Just be consistent, Liang'an coughed for a moment. It just happens to be someone I know, so borrowing it would be more efficient. They'll be back soon. It's completely consistent, there's no need to say. Your friends male and female. Are they good looking or not? How could you have this key to this house? Xiao Ziliu gossiped with great interest, obviously trying to dig deeper. Liang'an knew that this person had nothing serious in mind. There is also a possibility of impurities mixed in with such a rare sample. After all, it cannot be ruled out that rainwater may wash the soil from the outside sidewalk into the inside. However, if the soil samples collected were from the stone bricks surrounding the garden, then the problem would not be so serious. Xiao Zi compared several data obtained again and found that there were no shoe prints on the scene except for Li Liejuan's own shoes. This is probably because the killer was very cautious and put on shoe covers before entering the door. After the murder, he cleaned the outside clean. However, it is inevitable that a small amount of the required samples were left in the mopping water and washed into the garden soil. The texture of the soil itself may be basically the same, but the pollen stained during walking will not deceive people. It's the end of February now, and the plum blossoms have just begun to bloom. The forest park is completely open to all the public, and at its entrance, a must-pass area for entering the park is a vast area of plum trees. Liang'an pondered deeply. The killer crossed the entire forest park and entered the community from a sightseeing tree that had grown for over a decade near the wall. But how did he get out? Admittedly, there is still surveillance information to investigate, but there is only one poor surveillance video at the entrance, facing the direction of entering, so pedestrians leaving can only see their backs. Moreover, if only the time to go out can be used to screen the survey subjects. So from the afternoon until the early morning of the day after the discovery of the body, everyone who went out during this period, as well as hundreds of standalone villas in the villa area, may have hidden the murderer. It is extremely difficult to identify or point out a person solely through their back. Liang'an felt his chin, and this case lacking clues didn't seem very simple. Zhaoshuyuan.com boss. You've been found breaking into a private residence. Don't worry, comrade. The one downstairs is the mastermind who needs to take the blame on him. I need to call the police and I'll be on call at any time. Don't worry. Even if the captain kindly bought me steamed buns in the morning, there is still no mercy in my place, and that must come at a cost. Come on, I'll take you to catch the mastermind now. Lu Yao's loud shouting interrupted Yang An's already disconnected thoughts. He looked up helplessly towards the staircase. Far away, in addition to Lu Yao's unique personality, the sound of a horse's footsteps followed a slower but very light pace. Xiao Zi whistled and hid behind a nearby cabinet. It's none of my business. I'm just an unrelated group of laborers, at most an accomplice. Moreover, the ignorant are innocent. Lu Yao, who rushed down like a monkey, didn't stop his car and ran around the precious equipment on various central tables in the laboratory with small steps. Standing still, a shocked little voice gave a whoosh. With the gentle footsteps, a young man also walked down. He looks like a particular person, with every corner of his clothes perfectly positioned. His attire from top to bottom has probably been carefully matching his temperament. He is introverted and gentle, and over time, he appears more refined and refined. The pupils of young people have a lighter color, and their eyes are more like narrow phoenix eyes. Generally speaking, they should have a more sharp aura, but perhaps because their gaze is slightly lowered and their expression is calm like a lake at night, they appear particularly gentle. He looked at Liang'an with a strange expression in his eyes. Liang'an didn't mind, he should have anticipated this situation and waved to the stranger who stopped. His name is Jiang Qiu. Chapter 6. Flying Birds. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Let's continue. Liang'an waved and increased his voice. Lu Yao, come over here. Lu Yao, who didn't mind the hustle and bustle, was a bit disappointed and secretly made a just this gesture with his mouth. At the next moment, she followed the direction pointed by Liang'an and saw the hi.N display in an inconspicuous position on the corner table. That is an assembled computer, with countless types of computer accessories neatly arranged on a semicircular table within a radius of 4 meters. Lu Yao leaned in curiously. Jiang Qiu glanced a few more times in the direction of Lu Yao. Feel free to use it. This is my friend, surnamed Jiang, who is a doctor. Liang'an was very impolite and directly countered. Jiang Qiu added to herself, nodding in agreement, but her expression seemed somewhat confused. A bit afraid of strangers. Xiao Zi hugged his arm and scanned up and down a few times, feeling a bit interested for a moment. You can use this for now. Just remember to process the files that need to be processed. It's great to have money. Lu Yao sat down on the chair, feeling a premonition. She casually checked the computer's configuration and felt even more comfortable. Although searching for information does not require such a high configuration computer, it does not prevent Lu Yao, who is passionate about this field, from enjoying the feeling of using luxury goods. It's not a secret, there's no need to hide it. Liang'an looked at Xiao Zi again, meaning there's no need to worry about his friend. Xiao Zi touched his chin and stared at Jiang Qiu, who had been stunned by Liang'an's words, as if lost in thought. If I want to know when the handwriting on this book was written and to what extent can it be precise? Liang'an, however, was not influenced by himself. He took out the stray birds from the material evidence bag, which he had ordered before. Xiao Zi simply flipped through the pages of the artistic signature book twice, his gaze stopped, scanned for a moment, and then slowly said, within 3 months, under normal circumstances, it can be accurate to the sky, but after a long time, it will be difficult. Many factors will have an impact. How precise do you want to be? Between 4 to 13 years. The environment cannot be completely determined. Alternatively, I can give you a reference, but it may not necessarily be a fact. The environment is unknown, it would be fortunate to have a given year. Liang'an was somewhat disappointed, but still handed the book to Xiao Zi and said a few words in his ear. Naturally, Li Liejuan's bookshelf is the most likely location. Even if they have stayed elsewhere, no one should have arranged their books outside the bookshelf. But the question is there another possibility? I suspect that this book was originally a gift from Li Jun to someone. He didn't hesitate to reveal his guess: if this is really a gift, this person is at least very special to him. This is a small collection of poems, very famous, but not an ordinary reading material for most people at all stages of their lives. Just looking at the bookshelf upstairs by Li Jun, there are basically only learning materials for various compulsory education stages, and I am too lazy to replace them with other ones. Not to mention books downstairs, there's not even a piece of paper. And those books that have already passed the stage are obviously just piled up by the homeowner who is lazy to tidy up. Li Jun is clearly not someone who loves literature, and this kind of book is really out of place on his bookshelf, not something he would like to read himself. The signature on the page is placed in the corner, very carefully signed, with exquisite lettering but not prominent. Generally speaking, the name of the person who holds the book, rather than the author, is written on the book so that others can return the lost book to the owner or mark it when lending it to others. In this case, even the artistic handwriting signed by the bookworm will not put the name in an extremely inconspicuous position. So, what was this name signed for? If the gift given to someone is signed, then the relationship between the recipient and them must be closer. This carefully designed signature has a certain commemorative significance. But this book is still on his bookshelf, which is well preserved compared to other items. I think if we can determine the approximate signing time, it should narrow down the scope of the investigation. Giving gifts is very common among ordinary people. But for Li Jun, who has only the intersection of the internet and takeout with the real world, this is evidence of a rather special interpersonal relationship. What emotions did Li Jun give gifts for? Who is the person he gave it to? Why is this gift still at his home? Is it because he didn't muster the courage to give this gift, or is it because of something else? Problems surfaced one after another. There were hardly any clues left at the scene of the case that could help track down the culprit, and the only pollen traces provided an astonishing range of investigation, and it is very likely that it will ultimately be in vain. The only interpersonal relationships that can be investigated are still in the elusive and equally extensive online world. Generally speaking, interpersonal communication is an important factor in determining suspicion. But for Li Jun, who has been self-sealing for years, this is undoubtedly not an ordinary matter like investigating ordinary people. The person who is most familiar with him in reality is probably the little brother who runs several large orders to deliver takeout every day. Even so, it's just helping people dispose of garbage. As long as the prisoner is not present at the scene and the route planning is done so seamlessly, exposing their true appearance in a certain place. Or simply keeping the murder weapon in their hands and being discovered by someone of this type of foolish horsefoot. This case has become half a perfect murder. But if there is really a breakthrough in the investigation of interpersonal relationships, at least it also gives the prisoner a chance to make a temporary fool. Liang prefers to take one step at a time. The perfect way of committing a crime is certainly terrifying, but it does not prevent him from giving himself a little pleasure stimulation before reaching the most difficult step to prove. He has always been happy to experience the process. He pondered to himself. This book was obviously not originally placed in that location, but after the room was covered in dust. This is a strange thing. Liang touched his chin. Understanding who Li Jun intended to give the gift to may lead to groundbreaking results in investigating the causes of his unique past. Li Jun's life is full of mysteries, not because he has done something special, but because there are too many gaps in his life. All the archival materials are dry summaries, and all the consumption records are identical, like a robot winding up at a fixed time every day. What kind of thing can create such a person, such a surreal life? At the first moment of learning about his fixed schedule, Liang An's first thought was that he might have been placed under house arrest. But this idea was completely shattered after on-site investigation. The killer came from the outside world, and there were no signs of forced entry on the door. Li Jun seemed to have opened his own door, welcoming his own death. He is not unable to go out, and there is no trace of a second person living in his home. The door locks and handles are rusty and obviously left unused for a long time, and the number of orders can indirectly prove this. Even with pure curiosity, his life is worth exploring. Dr. Jiang, you also live in this community. Do you know Li Lijun from Building 11 in Block B? Or have you heard of anyone living there? Xiao Zi had already put away his things and just put down his phone, smiling at Jiang Qiu, who was standing there in a daze. He has a friendly attitude and a friendly smile, and few people naturally develop feelings for such people when they don't meet. Unless he himself is the one who has been upset and lost his composure. Sitting beside him, Lu Yao secretly glanced over and took the initiative to observe. Jiang Qiu was clearly startled by the sudden questioning. Liang'an saw this and also answered for him, he doesn't often live here. Xiao, don't ask too much. Oh. Xiao Zi squinted her eyes and couldn't help but raise the corner of her mouth, as if she had discovered a big secret. Next, let's take a look at the progress on Xiao Song's side. Xiao Lu, do you have anyone among Li Liejuan's classmates or teachers who is willing or can discuss his past in detail? Liang'an continued with his arrangements. I always feel that it won't be in vain to figure out Li Liejuan's past. From the archives alone, Li Lijun does not have anyone he is familiar with recently. The few people I found before, including his former roommates and mentor, all said they didn't know that he had any particularly close friends or relatives, and even didn't know about his parents' deaths. Lu Yao took on the task, scratched his head, and looked at Xiao Zi with confusion as his expression continued to change. The unilateral dark tide surged, and he responded before continuing to work. Liang'an greeted Jiang Qiu and left the laboratory with him. Before leaving, he even threw a string of keys to Xiao Zi. Xiao Zi moved a chair and sat next to Lu Yao. Lu Yao racked his brain and made a list of the filtered list. While sending messages and waiting for replies one by one, I couldn't help but sneak a curious glance at Xiao Zi taking notes in his own notebook. Who is Jiang Zhua? Lu Yao sensed the element and said strangely, where did you get all this gossip? Xiao Zi glanced at her and hesitated for a moment. You really don't listen to things outside the window. You don't have a little sisters? Little brother or something who has shared Weibo hot search with you? Do you have it? Whenever you seriously post on Weibo, condescending to pay more attention, don't use web crawlers as daily information retrieval tools, and then use your spare time to play games. Xiao Zi sighed. The chairman of Fengyue Group, Jiang Zhua. Well, during the Chinese New Year, when they came to the stage and made a speech at the annual meeting, it stirred up 1,000 waves with just one stone. They all said that their appearance was amazing, that they looked like a celebrity, and that they were a bit older. Even though he is currently single, he has been scrutinized all over and caught in various hot searches for year.End bonuses, which is quite unique. However, he doesn't have any interests or hobbies in that area. Otherwise he might come up with a way to play. Look at this. Xiao Zi handed him his phone. On the phone is a photo, prominently from a public character information website on the encyclopedia, of a man standing on stage with a slightly overhead appearance similar to Jiang Qiu. Zhaoshuyuan.com. The photo is very clear, and the man's expression and appearance are very delicate. His eyebrows, eyes, and body shape are extremely similar, only slightly more mature than Jiang Qiu, whom he just met. The slight wrinkles at the corners of his eyes can reveal a trace of the wind and frost of time. Is it Jiang's brother? Lu Yao asked with uncertainty. It's not my brother, but my father. He's already in his 50s. Your Jiang brother's name is Jiang Qiu. Jiang Zhua's appearance is at least 10 years younger than his actual age, and he looks only 30 or 40 years younger. Perhaps as a middle-aged man, he takes good care of himself, or perhaps because his exceptional appearance blurs his judgment. Abuse of power. Disdain for you. Lu Yao looked disdainfully at Xiao Zi and his focus was a bit biased. Didn't he say that this boss is single, then brother Jiang? Who told you that I abused my power? It was just an investigation within a reasonable range. Xiao Zi slammed Lu Yao's head in frustration. Jiang Zhua is relatively low-key, but not so conflicted about paying attention to privacy. It is said that although he may have been involved in daily affairs, he has never been absent from his son's parent-teacher meeting. Even his usual behavior did not appear to be so wealthy, and it was normal for some students to mention it in shock. Elementary school students. It is said that Jiang Qiu, who had been a model representative student at the 6th-year parent-teachers meeting, was the kind of parent who would speak up on stage. But the people who attended the parent-teacher meeting and spoke never included his mother. Only when others were curious and asked, did they say that their child is from a single-parent family. After all, is it sharing teaching experience? The family environment still needs to be understood. This is the only distinctive content, and the whistleblower did not disclose any personal information, not even which school, but added some irrelevant character settings to satisfy curiosity, so to be honest, it's not too much. Chapter 7. Mystery. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Am I like a scammer? I think so, Mo Yunwan nodded sincerely. She was already ready to finish the work that had finally come to an end, ready to watch a good show excitedly. However, it turned out that Captain Liang, who pretended to be silent in the communication software, was forced to put the plan on hold. On this side, she waited for the rabbit while bearing the workload that normal forensic doctors should not bear. This is really a bit difficult, Song Qiaoyu concluded. There is a self-contained social chat system within the game, and among the 4 people just selected by Song Qiaoyu, including the 3 goddesses, including the demon mage, the whispering monster archer, the sorrowful assassin, and the swordsman, who can barely be considered a rival in love. 3 out of the 4 people showed online, so Song Qiaoyu sent messages to each of them first, roughly stating his identity as a police officer and the need to inquire with them about the situation. The demon master kindly replied, saying that it is best for elementary school students to finish their winter vacation homework before trying to deceive others, so as not to have a low IQ and be spanked by the teacher after finishing the vacation. And the female assassin is much more straightforward, using special code to directly type out a few bold and colorful characters. Scammer dead Ma. Ma is a mother's pinyin because the game's blocking word system does not allow it to be typed directly. After realizing the meaning, Song Qiaoyu, a mentally challenged elementary school student scammer who was almost 1.9 meters tall, didn't look very good. He didn't understand why even that child from Lu Yao could easily ask people and still leave behind a passionate and infuriating stall like the gang leader just now. Perhaps it's because she can easily retrieve the player's detailed identity information and phone number, which sounds credible and friendly. She also reports the police number directly on the phone, which sounds like a friendly. The police sister. Mo Yunwan suppressed a smile, but her words were indeed very accurate. This kind of thing is like a common occurrence for Lu Yao. Although lacking in Lu Yao's professional investigation ability and communication skills, Song Qiaoyu did try the alarm number. However, the meticulously crafted content was blocked by the game system of Tiansha and turned into a strange row of dynamic expressions, with colorful effects and even the previous statements appearing less serious. That's a matter of experience, Mo Yunwan summarized. Implicitly, Song Qiaoyu was not ashamed to lose to Lu Yao, who was 6 years younger than him but had extensive experience in related fields. It is only natural for her to obtain intelligence at the fastest speed, which is legitimate, reasonable, and legal. Song Qiaoyu also found it difficult to realize that his problem was not whether he had issued a warning, but rather that his poor sentence construction was difficult to convince. Ultimately, it was still a matter of experience. But a proud hammer would rather bend than bend. Just tell me, Liang sent you this job, didn't he want to see you laugh? Mo Yunwan couldn't help but laugh and patted Song Qiaoyu's shoulder, seemingly sincerely sighing. The workplace is cold and violent, big guy. I won't beat him up. Song Xiaoyu doesn't want to talk to her. He is staring at the last target. That archer of unknown gender. Coincidentally, this archer is the game friend of the account owner, with a very high level of intimacy, ranking among the top in countless friend lists. Therefore, Song Xiaoyu had the highest expectations for obtaining information from this person, and could be considered the top seed player. He wrote a short essay of over 100 words just to explain the specific situation. When sending the message, the archer was on the public screen and comparing the lyrics with human text. You say it one by one, I say it one by one. Yes, it's like a sticky and greasy love song like a little couple. The long wave sign at the end of the sentence makes people feel like they're going up in the wind. Describing such a boring activity, they seem to have a lot of fun playing, perhaps it contains some kind of fun, or maybe it's just boring people killing time together. The archer also seemed to be momentarily addicted to it and forgot to reply to private messages. After waiting for a long time, Song Xiaoyu even looked up the lyrics of the song with great anticipation, to see what they had sung and where they had gone before he could see the news. The reply has finally arrived. Did you lose the big adventure? Song Xiaoyu's eyes became increasingly confused. After struggling for a moment, he finally let go of his firm pride and turned to Mo Yunwan for help, enduring humiliation. Mo Yunwan sighed and explained to Song Xiaoyu what sincere adventure was, while starting to help communicate the situation. She would still be intermittently enthusiastic, and at this point, she was also a bit afraid that Song Xiaoyu would scare people away again. The archer was very enthusiastic, but at first thought it was a friend who had bought a new account and was joking with him. After explaining, Mo Yunwan hesitated and accepted the request. But what do you need to know? The archer typed very quickly, and in less than 5 seconds, he sent out a second string of questions. About which person? What is their ID? Did they cheat on equipment or did some scumbags cheat on money and sex offline? Mo Yunwan responded. Sorry, some detailed case information cannot be disclosed at the moment. Can you tell us your phone number? The archer hesitated for 2 minutes this time. How about we have a voice chat? Bow and Arrow carried a very commonly used multiplayer voice communication software, which was also available on Lu Yao's computer. Her account did not automatically log in, so Song Xiaoyu temporarily registered one. Song Xiaoyu held his breath and reported his police number and identity completely on the voice communication software. Song Xiaoyu, a police officer from the 3rd Brigade of Yuzhou Criminal Investigation Brigade. What concise and easy to understand personal information. When connected to voice, the sound coming from the laptop is very clear and standard Mandarin. The voice was suppressed a bit low, and surprisingly, it was a calm male voice. Even just listening to the voice, it appeared very mature and steady. I may not have a clear understanding of many netizens' personal information, but I will try my best to explain everything I know. Sorry, I only have a short time, I need to do it as soon as possible. Surprisingly, this voice message sounds like this netizen is really a serious person. Mo Yun Evening News gave him several IDs listed by Song Xiaoyu. Jack. He's a liver emperor, so he's quite isolated and doesn't chat with people, but he's quite nice. He's always online and reliable when I see him. When I met him, I encountered him when he was playing a game, and he passed me the strategy. Then I played a few more games and became familiar with him. When I was scrolling through equipment, the dungeon was short of people and I kept asking him to work, which made me feel embarrassed. I ended up getting on 818. That's it. The speaker had been scrolling through the screen before, and I was stunned when I saw people. Soft Pottery is a veteran player who is very active and skilled. She is particularly enthusiastic about making rankings. Every late night at the end of each month, she sees her boring public screen during the matching period, and is considered a relatively outgoing girl. She has heard her commands in camp battles, and is very tough, daring to fight, and daring to be tough. But I don't know what kind of relationship she has with Jack. Loli doesn't eat donuts. I don't know this person very well, but I know she's on the fashion chart #1, the human demon number, a lifestyle player, and should be a collection of all fashion special effects mounts. If that's the case, she's really rich and nowhere to go, strange and naughty. I saw on the public screen that he had scolded people before, and his temper was quite violent. He scolded harshly and had a good mentality, but I really didn't have much interaction with him. As for, unbreakable and unstoppable. Mainly, he freely matched with PvP and won over me. His hand speed and reaction speed were quite extreme, and he fought fiercely. However, he didn't often play in the arena. It's a pity to only play dungeons on a regular basis, and I don't have much impression of anything else. He's also a type who doesn't talk much. Song Xiaoyu did find the right person. The archer has a good memory and has a certain impression of several people. Not to mention conciseness, the basic features are very clear. The activities described by archers are mostly on weekends, with very few occurring after dinner time on weekdays. And then Mo Yunwan made a mouth gesture and asked Song Xiaoyu, who was resting next to her. Song Xiaoyu took the laptop. Do these people, including you, have any special grudges or grievances between them? The archer was stunned. He seemed to ponder for a moment. Actually, when I usually go back to my dormitory to rest, I can play games online on my own. I can't participate in many activities and have limited time to play, so I can't guarantee a more comprehensive description. Our gangs are not hostile, and there are no conflicts of interest. There really isn't any special grudges. If there were any special social accidents, the only one was 818. Although I don't know exactly what happened, when I went surfing the internet and had a great time, I never expected it to happen to me, he said, a bit aggrieved. If I had known so many misunderstandings, I would have clearly stated in my personal profile that I am a man. The problem is that I am playing on a man's account, and I have not used voice calls here before. I just didn't deliberately prove or clarify it. The implication was that he didn't know he had become one of the women, just like an old man. To be honest, before hearing his voice conversation, Song Xiaoyu didn't think he would be such a person. Perhaps it's because the love songs sung on the public screen are too sticky and greasy, or perhaps it's because his wave number is too skillful, unlike a serious person. The online world is truly chaotic and flashy, with reality and virtuality not matching. Regarding this, Song Xiaoyu decided to first maintain a sense of awe. Do you often use this software to communicate while playing games? He finally noticed another question. Yeah, dungeons, multiplayer PvP, and occasional large-scale events that require coordination. This software can group voice calls to pull small rooms, or everyone can voice together, commanding to turn on and off the microphone at any time, which is more convenient. Song Xiaoyu turned off his wheat and frowned as he turned to Mo Yunwan. Archers are very cheerful and cooperative in their work. Seeing that he had nothing to ask, he breathed a sigh of relief, but still left a message telling Song Xiaoyu that although his phone may not be by his side, he may not be able to reach him on the phone. But his computer has been online for a long time during the day, and he can always leave messages through communication software. He even enthusiastically added a special concern to the account that Song Xiaoyu uses to contact, so that he can see messages as soon as he checks the communication software. Song Xiaoyu has not been treated for so long, and it is truly touching to finally come across someone who is warm-hearted and doesn't even consider him a fraud. Although there were indeed factors that contributed to Mo Yunwan's help, the target audience this time was indeed very patient. It seems that Xiaolu Yao's intelligence may not be complete either. But things like voice may not be able to save files. In theory, these occupy too much memory space. Mo Yunwan flipped through the software's user manual. But we can investigate the communication records of the accounts he has used. If he is really not absent from daily activities, then excluding the use of time outside of these daily activities is his time for handling interpersonal relationships. Song Xiaoyu sent a few messages to Lu Yao, although I don't know exactly what this software will record, the basic time is likely to be provided to us. The focus can be on the few people we just got to know. Mo Yunwan was helping to ask the software accounts of the other few people and glanced at Song Qiaoyu, who was frowning. For you, even if you ask people, matching these identities one by one is a big project. Let's leave it all to Lu Yao. It's not impossible either. Song Qiaoyu was also thoroughly devastated, simply stuffing all the recorded messages into Lu Yao's email and letting her choose and check them herself. I've noticed that you're really putting in a lot of effort this time. The impact of this case is too big, we need to rush time. Mo Yunwan watched as he had just taken a break, then pulled out the surveillance footage and started fast-forwarding and taking notes, half lying on the back of the sofa and watching the screen together. There are no other clues at the scene about the killer. Song Qiaoyu remained silent for a while, and a sentence drifted out. His hand movements did not stop, and he casually placed the phone that had been vibrating just now aside. Are you afraid this case will become a mystery? Mo Yunwan looked at him with a stern expression. I thought you were just responsible for helping the victim's family retaliate when arresting someone, and you didn't even recognize the criminal's mother. She seemed to remember something, looking up at the ceiling and smacking her lips, as if feeling a little emotional. I have an intuition that there is a problem with this case. The intuition of wild animals. That sounds very reassuring. Mo Yunwan also took out his phone and casually swiped it twice. When did you start so actively wanting to show your all-round problem-solving skills? Did Xiao Zi dislike you, not partner with you, and take Xiaolu, who has more potential, or did Liang'an finally ask you to go see the water dispenser? Song Qiaoyu's face is not very good. Are you okay? Mo Yunwan said caring words, but her expression was malicious, as if trying to come up with some special answer. 79 people, but Song Qiaoyu was not worried about anything related, just troubled by the difficulty of his task. As soon as he finished counting, he rubbed his temples and gritted his teeth, saying, "What kind of remote community is this, a holy land for elderly care? The land is vast and the people are sparse, but there is also a prerequisite for it. To pass through such a large forest park, this is a shortcut, and there are also many people who simply pass through here. There is only one open door in this place." Mo Yunwan opened the map and yawned. Zhaoshuyuan.com, I care about one thing, if Li Lijun really becomes so autistic, under what circumstances would he tell others that he lives in this place where birds don't poop? If he meets true love and wants to have an online romance, or if he wants to compete with real people and is angry enough to give up his autistic life. This question is based on what he told others. Do you think it's because someone investigated the address he found, rather than because he told others? Mo Yunwan shrugged, there is always a reason for a change in attitude towards life. Dr. Mo, can you tell me what special reason you have traveled so far to this place where birds don't poop? Song Qiaoyu turned his head at this moment and looked straight into Mo Yunwan's eyes. Mo Yunwan was startled by the sudden gaze. What disease are you suffering from? Song Qiaoyu also learned from her previous movements, shrugging her shoulders. He placed his phone on the table, and the inverted screen leaked a glimmer of light along the edge that connected to the desktop. The phone is currently on call. Mo Yunwan suddenly understood something. I really want to ask you, who exactly is the person who said you have a clear idea before? A familiar voice came from the door. Mo Yunwan was stunned for a moment before squinting her eyes and saying, You, surnamed Liang, can you find someone to plot against me? I think your personality of prying into others' privacy anytime and anywhere should be changed. Otherwise, I cannot guarantee that no outsider will be averse to your behavior, and I will also be very distressed. Liang'an opened the door and walked in, taking off the wireless earphones from his ear while walking. Mo Yunwan snorted and said, Xiao Song and I are close friends in life and death. What kind of outsider are we? I'm not familiar with you, Song Qiaoyu snorted coldly. Chapter 8. Dark Tide. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. So, where did you take the senior? Why didn't you see anyone? Mo Yunwan looked anxiously at the door behind Liang'an. There was no one there, only a few cars occasionally speeding past the entrance of the security booth located further away. What you said is like I'm not here to solve a case, but to serve as a guardian for your senior. Liang'an spread out his hand. I also have my job, I'm very dedicated. You know that. If you ever get hit by someone who retaliates with a stick, I wouldn't be surprised. Mo Yunwan was so angry that he gritted his teeth and said, otherwise, you might be killed by the retaliation. I will personally do an autopsy for you. Don't worry, the craftsmanship is exquisite, and I will bring justice to you. Also, please treat the prisoner to a good meal before his death. The rewards and punishments are absolutely clear. Your senior has returned home, how can you keep following me? Is that appropriate? Liang'an reasoned with her, I'm going to die. You're the first suspect. Can you still give me an autopsy? Two of you, are you still checking the surveillance? Song Qiaoyu asked from a distance. Check it out. Mo Yunwan was getting angry and couldn't bear it anymore as she thought. What exactly did you put in your head? Can you find out something? Is there a comparison object? Or do you think the killer can hold a blood-stained knife and shake his head through the surveillance cameras that ghosts can see at the entrance? Is he stupid? So you started mocking me because of this? Song Qiaoyu said strangely, knowing that this person was now furious and didn't need to be in sync with her anymore. Not only that, Mo Yunwan took a deep breath and calmed down. Do you think I'm really just here to find someone to meet? I'm here to confirm something. I don't believe it, Liang'an smiled calmly. It's just an excuse. The deceased once held something in their hands, but their posture was changed after death. Mo Yunwan ate very thoroughly, so she gave up struggling and got straight to the point. We need to see what was on site, about the size of a duck egg, or maybe a pillar. Liang'an hissed and patted his head, looking somewhat distressed, but a sly smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. This is really hard on me, he said. Mo Yunwan quietly rolled his eyes and said, you're crazy. I remember there weren't any special props from the deceased's side to the doorstep, Song Qiaoyu believed and was very puzzled. There weren't any outside the door either. It's also possible that the prisoner took them. Speaking of forensic science. Do we need to come specifically to the scene to study this? I'll go ask Xiao Zi. Xiaolu should be more reliable than you, Mo Yun sighed in his evening attire. Xiaolu's phone hasn't been answered, she should be contacting those few people, Song Qiaoyu frowned. Then let's go directly to the scene again. He really believed that Liang'an didn't remember anything. Farewell, Mo Yunwan waved her hand. I believe it. Xiao Zi can have a longer memory. If you want to support me, I'll satisfy you. I'll go back first, the autopsy report is not finished, it's already 7 o'clock. There's nothing else, some people have specially arranged that I won't be able to fulfill my wishes, and I'm not interested in staying here. I think it means something else. As the sky grew darker, standing outdoors, the natural light gradually dimmed. The bright light from the phone screen hit Liang'an's face, shining like a ghost face in a ghost movie. He lowered his head, looked at his phone, and said softly. The other two turned to him. There's a big problem. That is a message from Lu Yao, which has been recorded for 3 minutes. The 3 people you gave out, among whom it is said to be swordsmen from Li Liejuan's rival's online game, had some trouble. Lu Yao found his phone and called his sister. She said that the person had an accident today and had just been taken to the hospital for rescue. They are already rushing to the hospital. You really managed to find useful information in a timely manner. You're really lucky. Mo Yunwan was stunned for a moment and turned toward Song Qiaoyu in surprise. Well, indeed. Song Qiaoyu himself seemed to have no objection to this question, but when he looked up, he he frowned again. But isn't the car here? How did they get there? Recruiting help. Okay. Mo Yunwan answered casually, but Liang on the side was somewhat surprised. The black six-seater bus was still parked safely on the roadside near the security pavilion, and even the car keys had already been returned to Liang by Xiao Zi. Early in the morning, the car that Song Qiaoyu was riding in carried the body back to the station. Mo Yunwan, who just came over, was still driving a private car. Wherever the person was, the car was, and there was no place to move it. Liang exchanged a glance with Mo Yunwan, who had looked over. Where did you throw the senior? This is a question. He said he wants to go back to sleep. This is the answer. Two sounds sounded simultaneously. Mo Yunwan covered her face. Liang remained silent and let out a sigh. Do you really believe what he told you? Mo Yunwan couldn't believe it. How many times has he deceived you for the same reason? What's wrong? If he dares to deceive, do you also dare to believe it? At this point, Liang couldn't help but continue to argue. He sighed, I'm really not his guardian, he can't do anything. But it's not even dementia yet. Li Liejuan's kitchen is missing a watermelon knife. It seems we've gone our separate ways. Those two people really don't have vision. I said it's okay for him to participate, so it's really okay. The two people without vision are extremely busy. Xiao Zi drove the car and had to pay attention to the sound of the speaker on Lu Yao's phone while driving. Lu Yao was operating at high power today, making phone calls one after another, and reimbursing phone bills may require a roll of paper-like form. She sat in the back seat, holding her phone in conversation between her shoulders and head, taking notes with one hand and operating Xiao Zi's phone with the other. All her other devices were in her computer bag, lying on the sofa next to Song Qiaoyu with her laptop. Jiang Qiu sat in the passenger seat, leaning quietly to the side, as if she didn't exist. The sound of Lu Yao in the back seat is very loud, and the sound in the speaker is also played very loudly in the car Bluetooth for Xiao Zi to hear clearly. Due to the urgent debugging, the decibel is a bit too high, which is deafening in a small space. Jiang Qiu seemed unaffected, looking down at the road conditions from the side window and glancing at the route indicated by the navigation. I figured it out, Lu Yao finally hung up the phone. That swordsman. That's probably the right name. His name is Ma Jun, an unemployed vagrant who lives in another apartment. He's single and only stays home for a few days during the Chinese New Year. When his sister asked him to have dinner, she found out that something had happened and an ambulance had arrived. His family is very wealthy and he runs a distillery. With good relationships, this person is also a wealthy second-generation living alone. You can tell from the living standards of these game tycoons, I know. Looking at his equipment in the game, I think this person's family background is extraordinary. Even the only daughter of a wealthy family like her, who cannot be considered a millionaire but also has some small money, feels quite luxurious. After thinking for a while, Lu Yao felt a bit inappropriate again and leaned his head to say to Jiang Qiu, Jiang. Jiang, what I meant by, you, is not you, it's the deceased. Ignoring the fact that his parents have both died, his family used to be rich. Although it's not that outrageous, it's outrageous to have enough inheritance to cover the expenses of playing games for so many years. Playing games is very expensive, She still cares about her words, perhaps because Lu Yao is afraid that this gentle wealthy second-generation may be an introverted type who cannot express any resentment even if there are any misunderstandings. Xiao Zi sighed and said. Don't explain. The more you explain, the more incorrect it becomes. I have already arrived at the contact information of the other people, and I can go and ask them one by one while driving. Why is it so coincidental? I just picked one that seemed to have a slight motive, but how could I just find the one that happened to have an accident? Lu Yao thought more and more, feeling more curious. Indeed, this person seems a bit suspicious. Xiaozi couldn't help but recall the previous scene. But when a person dies, we can't ask. When a person is alive, we can wait for them to be okay to ask. Do we need to shout and scream like you do? Lu Yao pretended not to hear and blew a beautiful whistle to cover up his embarrassment. But it's the first time I've driven such a luxury car from a private garage, Xiaozi sighed. I can only say it again, wealthy families. The hospital has also been contacted, and the person is still busy rescuing. It's a heart problem, heart failure. But he has no past medical history, and the physical examination is quite healthy. The symptoms are also very unusual. The doctor suspects that he may have taken some special medication, which caused poisoning before these symptoms appeared. Lu Yao didn't have time to agree in time this time and lowered his head to look at the computer screen. Did you save it? The discovery was relatively timely, but the conclusion is still early. Lu Yao looked up. So what would happen if we were in the past now? Xiaozi frowned and casually pulled down the brake, stopping at the intersection of traffic lights. Ma Jun's parents both went to the hospital with the ambulance and are now waiting outside the ward for news. His sister is watching on the scene, and it was her who answered the phone just now. Because Ma Jun was rushed to the ambulance, his phone was left at home. I just checked again, although his sister only said it was a merchant family and runs a distillery. But in reality, this family is not an ordinary merchant family. The so-called distillery is the domestic branch of an internationally renowned high-end red wine brand, and Ma Jun's father is the chairman of the branch, with an estimated wealth of over 100 million. His mother is also an important shareholder of the company. She has also opened a financial enterprise and invested in more than a dozen small and medium-sized enterprises. She is regarded as a relatively qualified professional woman. Oh yes, and her sister is currently a senior cadre in his father's company. She holds dual doctoral degrees in management and law from a prestigious university, and her resume is so impressive. She can write a whole book just by adding up her award records during her studies. What about himself? Asked Jiang Qiu. Lu Yao paused for a moment, obviously confused, and even rubbed his eyes. Ma Jun, 23 years old, according to the information, only has a high school diploma and did not attend university. Currently unemployed. His sister said she doesn't see him during holidays and festivals. She was a bit surprised. This is quite special, he's completely different from the rest of his family. Ma Jun's profile, compared to his extremely excellent family, is simply a matter of doubting his own eyes. No wonder he lives alone, Xiaozi suddenly realized. But his grades are not bad, and his ranking in the 3 years of high school exams is not low, nor does he have any intellectual problems. Lu Yao has already stripped away his family's wealth and started to study Ma Jun's unusual aspects, picking useful information from a few pages of electronic materials. I even won an Olympiad Math Award in elementary school, first class at the provincial level, and I only got the city-level award in that competition, but I just took it by the way. This is not an ordinary person either. That's strange. Xiaozi started waiting for the red light and took a moment to glance at Ma Jun's ID photo on the information. His parents are so awesome, so it's not too much to just give him a job, is it? I studied hard and completed compulsory education, worked hard to attend high school for 3 years, and consistently ranked among the top. Then, I didn't even take the college entrance exam and went home without doing anything. I can't evaluate it, muttered Lu Yao, flipping through all the information of Ma Jun's family like a lantern. Zhaoshuyuan.com, this is not what he wants. Jiang Qiu suddenly spoke up and turned to the corner where Lu Yaoping had released the information. Lu Yao tilted his head and looked towards the direction of his fingers, where Ma Jun's ID photo was attached. Ma Jun's face in the photo is expressionless, with straight facial features and a strong and determined line on his face. Judging from the proportion of his upper body, his height is probably not short either. Perhaps because he was wearing a fitted suit and a neat tie, he had a steadfast demeanor that remained motionless like a mountain. It really doesn't look like an unemployed wanderer. He looks like a serious person. Lu Yao muttered. Jiang Qiu remained silent, hesitantly putting down her hand under Lu Yao's gaze and continuing to scrutinize Ma Jun's photo with her lowered eyes. In no time, Lu Yao clicked on his phone and let out a self-reflection. He is wearing a suit that fits perfectly and is a custom-made style with no wrinkles on the top or bottom. It should be noted that he is wearing the same brand of custom-made new suits as his father in the company's official website picture. Judging from his lack of profession and actual separation from his family, he probably does not have a need for formal attire in his daily life. However, he still buys clothes that he doesn't need in his daily life, and even wears them with a heavy tie when taking a regular ID photo. This proves that he admires his parents very much and has never given up his desire to work for them. They look like the people he wants to become, said the leader in the group. Lu Yao read out the messages displayed on his phone word by word, gradually clarifying his thoughts. Yes, Jiang Qiu lowered her eyes as if she had finally breathed a sigh of relief and nodded lightly. Chapter 9. Surge. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. It's not as simple as this coincidence. Just as we were about to investigate, something happened immediately. Mo Yunwan knocked on the table. Xiaolu is not Conan, there is no death buff. So according to your thoughts, what role does this swordsman play in our story? Liang'an looked at her phone and asked her without looking up. Hello, I'm a forensic doctor. Why don't you ask Song Qiaoyu about this? Mo Yunwan deliberately looked a bit cunning. Is it suicide due to fear of guilt? Song Qiaoyu, who was commendable for being diligent and inquisitive, candidly revealed his guess. Going home, taking medication, committing suicide. It does fit the psychology of some passionate killers. Liang'an looked up from his phone. But personally, what I care more about is this person's motives. It's not difficult to understand according to the original emotional entanglement. This time, Mo Yunwan forgot that she still insisted on being a forensic expert who stayed out of the situation, and gave a smack. But why don't I really like this development? She looked at Song Qiaoyu again. Song Qiaoyu had an intuition that someone was waiting for him to make a fool of himself, and seemed to treat him as the only designated musician. He leaned back on the door beam without saying a word, and if the enemy didn't move, I wouldn't move. This swordsman, or what we call his real name now, is Ma Jun. He is an outsider from an excellent family. He achieved ordinary accomplishments, lived a monotonous life, and had a certain degree of similarity to Li Lijun. They were all young men living alone, and their families were not poor. Although Li Lijun was an orphan, he had a large inheritance of his own. The wealth and status of Ma Jun's family can be easily seen, but he also lives in a separate residence from his family, unemployed, and separated from the normal population for a long time. They are addicted to the same game, and these coincidences don't look so ordinary when combined. Song Qiaoyu couldn't help but open his mouth, but as if remembering something, he withdrew his words. Assuming that due to emotional entanglement, two people collide and spark, causing one of them to come from thousands of miles away in front of the other, kill him, and then rush back to their own home. The home of their own family. They put in so much effort to conceal so many possible traces, and then immediately take medicine to commit suicide the next day. Mo Yunwan was amazed and even began to feel a bit sinister. If that's the case, it would have to be a lot of hatred, or maybe he accidentally discovered that our team led by Captain Liang was too excellent, and in despair, he clicked and ended himself. Lu Yao called after he was taken to the hospital. Song Qiaoyu even reminded her seriously. But I didn't see anyone feeling any embarrassed. You say, if Ma Jun was really the culprit who planned the entire murder and erasing the traces, how would he arrange his time before Li Lijun was killed yesterday morning? Me. I glanced at Liang'an and found that he hadn't looked at anyone. Mo Yunwan was stunned for a moment and pointed to Song Qiaoyu. Are you asking him? Song Qiaoyu shook his head. I didn't ask anyone, Liaonan said slowly as he closed his phone screen and stood up. Where are you going? Song Qiaoyu reacted quickly. Ma Jun's home. His parents' home. I am very curious about him personally. I have a premonition that this case will never be too simple. At this time, Lu Yao and his group had just arrived at the hospital. You guys are here, like this. The patient is still being treated, the doctors are busy inside, and the family is waiting outside. The nurse at the front desk rarely actually saw this battle, although she had told me in advance on the phone. She was still stunned by the documents Lu Yao took out and quickly responded. Why don't you wait outside, police officer, or ask the family about the situation? That gentleman, who is the patient's father, seems to be in a stable mood, so investigating and collecting evidence should be no problem. It seems like a nurse who has watched several criminal investigation films, very empathetic. Nurse sister, we need to confirm some details. Lu Yao is young, cute in appearance, and has a sweet mouth. She is indeed a good hand at making the conversation partner not overly nervous, as well as being reliable in controlling the level of familiarity and the content of inquiries. Watching Lu Yao talk to the nurse, Xiaozi walked to the emergency room door that she had just written down, followed by Jiang Qiu wearing a mask. The gentleman sitting on the left side of the third row. Jiang Qiu suddenly spoke up. His voice was not loud, even almost completely hidden under the mask, and could only be just captured by Xiao Ziminrui's hearing. Xiao Zi looked over at the words. There was indeed an elderly person sitting there. He looked about 50 or 60 years old, with furrowed brows and a slight bow, as if thinking about something. Place your hands flat on your knees, but sit steadily, perhaps because your waist is very straight. There were only 4 or 5 people sitting on the rows of seats next to the corridor, and there was a woman talking on the phone next to the window at the edge of the corridor. She turned her back and half covered her mouth, perhaps to avoid the noise from disturbing the quiet corridor. Due to various obstructions, only a portion of the lower face can be seen. That's Ma Jun's sister, Jiang Qiu's voice paused. The one who talked to Lu Yao on the phone before. Xiao Zi looked around a few more times. The status hasn't changed much, it's still under rescue, but it has some effect. The nurse said if you get out of danger or have any problems, please contact me immediately. I'll come over now. Lu Yao's voice came in at this moment. Xiao Zi waved his hand and gestured for Jiang Qiu to sit on the chair next to the water dispenser at the end of the corridor. Jiang Qiu was obedient and sat there staring blankly. Mr. Ma. The person sitting straight at the entrance of the emergency room turned around. Are you? This gentleman, who was at the end of his middle age, maintained a rather dignified posture in front of outsiders, without appearing too anxious or emotionally unstable. The furrowed face furrowed slightly, with a slightly puzzled expression, but still politely stood up, facing Xiao Zi at the same height as the one who walked by. Let's talk here. Xiao Zi took out his identification and walked to a relatively remote hallway with the old gentleman who didn't know why. Having clarified the purpose of his visit, Ma Cheng, this successful boss, also cleared his doubts. If according to what the doctor said, Xiao Juan's accident was due to taking medication, I don't think it's an impossible thing. Although Ma Cheng's expression is well controlled, he can't help but be a bit concerned and confused, with his eyes a bit hazy. But I really can't imagine what reason it would be if it were suicide. I haven't been very close to this child in recent years. We still need to investigate the specific situation, and we may not be able to confirm whether the fact is what we are currently guessing, Xiao Zi comforted. To be honest, I think you can also investigate that this child has been living outside on his own for the past few years, and we are elders. Indeed, some have overlooked him. I don't know much about his life outside. Today's events are indeed somewhat unexpected. He has always had a gentle personality, and he takes care of others without anyone to care of. Perhaps you see that he is not so excellent, but He paused as if thinking something. He is a good child. Seeing that Ma Cheng's emotions and personality seemed not too resistant, Xiao Zi continued the topic. May I ask, your son, Ma Jun, what kind of person is he? For example, how did he plan for his future in the past, and what was the situation when he proposed to live alone? Ma Cheng seemed to sense Xiao Zi's deep meaning, squinted his eyes, and studied the well-dressed police officer for a while, but there was not much resistance. Actually, I'm not surprised when you say that. You should have noticed that Xiao Jun is a bit uncomfortable with some things. Perhaps this kind of life is not suitable for him, but we can also support him. Police officer, you should have checked our information, and this is not a big deal for us. We don't rely on him for a living, and he doesn't have to accommodate our expectations. Personally, I don't think we should force him to do things that we can't adapt to just because our expectations and reality don't match. Xiao Zi is not unable to understand. There's nothing more to say after this. I think Xiao Shu should have already told you the specific process. She saw more than I did. Ma Cheng glanced at Ma Shu, who was talking on the phone, and then looked out the window. Parents always hope their children are safe. If he's unhappy outside, I don't want to, and my wife is also unhappy. This is already a polite way of rushing people. Xiao Zi was not angry either. After all, what should have been said had already been said. Just one more thing he cares about. How's it going? Lu Yao happened to rush over from the elevator and saw Ma Cheng still pondering on the side. He whispered to Xiao Zi, the cause is not yet certain, but the symptoms are related to heart and blood pressure. When it can be relieved and he wakes up, he can ask questions, but the specific time is uncertain. How is Ma Shu? I can talk to her, but I feel like she's also hiding something, but not so determined. It's like the feeling of not wanting to say anything and feeling unnecessary to say, constantly avoiding my topic. Lu Yao frowned. Although it's inconvenient to delve deeper into personal privacy, I'm very interested. Xiao Zi nodded and said, and then what? The cold air of the hospital mixed with the smell of alcohol, and the fans hummed in the empty hall. Lu Yao pondered for a moment. I don't think asking directly will yield any results. Since she has already made a decision to resist fully exposing herself to us, even if we force her, it will be difficult for us to get the answers we want. Instead, it will arouse vigilance. Or rather, disgust. What do you think should be done? Xiaozi raised her eyebrows and turned to look at her at the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com. The boss said they went to Ma Jun's parents' house, so let's go to Ma Jun's house now and see what his problem is. At this moment, Jiang Qiu, who was sitting on the side, turned his head and looked over. He just poured himself a glass of water and sat quietly on the side, holding it upright. They have arrived at the place. Xiao Zi closed his phone screen and made a silent gesture. So what's going on now? Lu Yao followed Xiao Zi and walked to the corridor near where Jiang Qiu was sitting. At this moment, Jiang Qiu was sitting in a daze, not sure if he had heard the conversation between Xiao Zi and Ma Cheng just now, as well as the discussion between Lu Yao and Xiao Zi. He sat there, slightly bowing his head, not knowing what he was thinking. Sit down first. Xiao Zi gestured for Lu Yao to sit next to Jiang Qiu. There are still some things that need to be clarified here. What's going on? Lu Yao was curious, but she was rushing to continue running around, lively and excited like a primary school student who had just started elementary school and was eager to finish her first assignment in life. Ma Jun's condition. Xiao Zi suddenly lowered his voice. If he dies, he needs to be taken back for an autopsy. If he's alive, he has to ask the doctor himself. It would be even better if he wakes up. Lu Yao licked his tongue, his voice also quieted down, feeling a bit guilty. You really thought ahead of time. The family is really listening. Xiao Zi waved his hand and looked towards the direction of the emergency room. We still have to wait until this door opens, no matter what the outcome is. I always feel that it's necessary. Lu Yao looked at what he was saying, feeling a bit confused and observed the emergency room door from side to side. After thinking for a while, I looked in Xiaozi's direction with some uncertainty, as if I had also found the answer. 3 people sat side by side in the corner.